In a world far, far away, where spirits live in everything around, there lives a guy who has the ability to communicate with them. Thanks to his ability, he was able to become a member of the Heroes Squad, consisting of 5 people, and together they defeated the Demon King. The guy who has such a unique ability is called a Universe. From a bird's-eye view, it opened up magnificent and mesmerizing view of the Kingdom of Foolish. In the center of the kingdom, there stood a majestic castle, which was not only an architectural masterpiece, but also a symbol of the greatness of this state. The dark-haired guy, with obvious surprise on his face, actively gesturing, asked questions about what was happening. He was interested in what was going on, and what could be the immediate cause of such unexpected behavior of his colleagues. The fierce hero who managed to defeat the Demon King himself looked at him with a stern look. Behind him were the rest of his team, each of whom made an invaluable contribution to this difficult battle. A menacing and imposing man, clad in heavy armor, informed the Universe, speaking in a stern and confident tone, that he was not their comrade at all, and he is simply responsible for various magical devices. The rude statement was supported by a young blonde girl who was touching up her newly painted lips. She said that the guy did not talk to anyone during the hikes and was always on his own. Another lady of the team also decided to speak up, adding that Universe, due to his unique ability, seemed to look down on everyone else. Her gaze seemed even more stern and intimidating than the knight's. The guy who found himself in such an awkward situation stuttered from nerves. He tried to explain that he simply did not even know how to talk to people, but he tried very hard to do his job. The hero smiled evilly and declared that he did not understand at all what Universe was mumbling. His gaze was filled with a sense of arrogance, and he himself clearly did not have any warm feelings for the guy opposite. This was becoming more and more obvious. Universe froze in surprise. He was perplexed listening to all these insults from his team. But the guys did not stop. They asked why he thought that there was any use from him, because he did nothing special. The guy was in a state of complete confusion. He asked, what about his magical horse, in which there was a spirit? To this, the hero only rolled his eyes, which gave away his hidden intentions. In his gaze, it was read that he had planned something not entirely good. The fair-haired youth, holding his head high and with confidence in every step, boldly walked towards the horse standing next to him. He spread his arms out to the sides and with a slight grin declared that with the service of this, every person can handle it. Approaching the magic horse, he kicked it with all his might, calling it a useless piece of iron. Universe certainly didn't expect such rudeness, especially from his colleagues, with whom he was on the same team. The guy immediately rushed towards his incredible creation, loudly shouting its name, Trans. He rather hesitantly and with some excitement turned to the savior of this world with a request to stop and cease all kinds of mockery. Without realizing it, the boy involuntarily placed his hand on the girl's forearm, who was dressed in clothes that strongly resembled those of a nun. In response to this, she turned her displeased gaze to her hand, expressing disapproval of his action. And the very next second, as if not wanting to waste time, she quickly swung and struck him, which landed right between his legs, causing him unbearable, unexpected pain. The boy squeezed his legs together in pain and fell to his knees. It seemed that he simply could not even try to get up, as unbearable pain pierced his body and left no chance for relief. And the girl hissed an insult at the young man. She had already told him that he shouldn't touch her. The girl hated it when people she didn't like touched her. You could tell even from her face, full of anger and disgust. The guy who couldn't get up extended his hand towards the horse lying under the savior's foot and asked if Trans was okay. The hero just grinned, not feeling any particular emotions, and stated a simple fact. Universe was more concerned about his own stuff than the team members. In the blonde's opinion, this situation looked simply disgusting and unacceptable. And then his face became disfigured from a sudden idea that came to his head. He raised his head and arrogantly asked the guy not to worry, because they would patch him up too, just like this piece of trash. Universe woke up late in the evening. He was lying all beaten up on a pile of various garbage, from simple bags to buckets, boards, and other junk. When the young man opened his eyes, the first thing the young man saw were dark rain clouds, which had already begun to cover the sky with their gloomy mass. It seemed that even the weather was not on his side that day. The guy covered his face with his hand, which was already changing due to frustration and anger. It seemed that most of all he wanted to burst into tears like a small child. He thought about the fact that in the hero squad everyone had an important role. The hero himself must become the next king and betroth himself to the princess. The warrior must become the commander of this country, the priestess must become a great saint, and the young sorceress must become a great sage. Universe had, even he himself did not know. Sometime later he worked in the Department of Research and Maintenance of Magical Devices. The guy was working on a magic horse. There were a huge number of books, various instruments, flasks, and solutions around, each of which had its own purpose. The guy patted Trans on the side and happily announced that he had finally fixed him, which meant that he would soon be running like new again. The people working in the same place turned around in surprise, not understanding Universe's conversations with the machine. The guy was walking down the corridor all alone. It seemed he was completely immersed in his thoughts, completely oblivious to the people passing by. He was carefully holding a folder of papers in his hands as if there was something important in it. As he walked down the corridor, he suddenly noticed something interesting on one of the walls, which caught his attention and made him stop to take a closer look at it. There was a newsboard on the wall. It seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary, but in the very center of it was a huge poster, on which the white-haired hero who had recently mocked the universe was flaunted. The guy smiled when he saw this poster, as if nothing had happened. And then he remembered about Typhon. He was interested in how she was doing. She was getting married. The young man put the thought in his head that he would visit the girl today if he had a free minute and continued on his way. Suddenly he was called out. One of his colleagues said that Gatsuan was calling him. At the moment when the guy entered the boss's office, the latter, without bothering to tear himself away from reading, glanced at him briefly, and, without even bothering to put the sheet of paper he was holding in his hands on the table, said that Universe was fired. The boy froze in place, as if his feet had suddenly gone into an endless void underground. He found himself in a state of profound surprise, as such a development of events had come as a complete surprise to him. Universe asked why Gatsuan made such a decision. The boss turned away and sat comfortably in his chair and said that the guy was really disgusting. He talks to the devices while he repairs them. He wanted to explain himself, and awkwardly, stuttering due to his inability to communicate, he spoke about the spirit inside the magical device. Gatsuan didn't even listen to the young man to the end. He asked why he couldn't speak loudly and clearly. The boss was already tired of listening to his muttering, and his colleagues generally complained that Universe was unfriendly. The man showed with his whole appearance that he had absolutely no intention of listening to the guy's speech. But despite this, he persistently tried to explain himself, because his job was dear to him. Gatsuan did not leave the young man alone and continued to interrupt him persistently. In the process of his explanation, he stated that the engraved name of the universe, which was placed on the devices he created, would be removed and replaced with his own name. Universe's devices, all the customers liked them very much, so thanks to his work, Gatsuan was highly valued. The man grimaced and added that he would become an official, apologized, although it looked more like another mockery, and added that he was grateful for the work done. The sun was shining outside, children were happily walking along the street, and adults were flashing here and there, some of them enjoying the weather, and some were rushing about on business. However, Universe was not at all happy with the weather. He was depressed and slowly moved his feet. He exhaled heavily, feeling the tension leave his body, and plunged into deep thought about where it would be easier and more convenient for him to find a new job that would match his skills and desires. Suddenly, he heard two girls hurrying somewhere, talking about how today the princess, the spirit of the wind, was finally getting married to the savior who had dealt with the demon king. The young man remembered what he had been thinking about in the corridor. He had completely forgotten that he was going to drop in on Typhon's wedding. The ceremony itself took place outside. The weather was magnificent, so nothing prevented a huge number of people from lining up to watch the wedding of the hero and the princess, the spirit of the wind. The square itself, which was on a hill, was much less crowded, only the most important guests. In the center was an arch and a bell. The wind spirit was a little confused, but it seemed as if she was upset by what was happening. Universe threw a dark cloak over himself, in order not to stand out and completely merge with the crowd. He froze in admiration, looking at the bride. Typhona looked simply magnificent in this outfit. The guy smiled, looking at the beautiful ceremony. He sincerely and with all his heart wished that the princess, who was the central figure of this solemn event, was absolutely happy. The girl with the scarf on her head, the one who was a member of the hero squad, spoke loudly. She said that today they would marry the princess, the spirit of the wind, and the hero who saved this world. Universe tried hard not to give in to negative emotions and not to get upset. However, it was quite obvious that he was overcome by disturbing thoughts that did not give him peace. The spirits of this world are very kind and always feel sincere joy and satisfaction when given the opportunity to help people, which is a significant matter for them. It seems that it is a great honor for them to swear allegiance to a person. However, the young man was full of confidence that, no matter the circumstances, a person should not allow himself to place himself above the spirits, especially in relation to those who had sworn allegiance to him. The princess seemed to be getting more and more upset, as if she wasn't even trying to hide her emotions and simply lowered her eyes to the floor, not even looking at her fiancé. People noticed that Typhon was very worried, but they thought that it was not surprising and normal, because her husband would be the hero of this country. However, something caught the girl's attention and she turned to the crowd. Typhon smiled happily at the guests and waved her hand at them, thus creating a friendly atmosphere. It seemed that she was not only pleased to see these people, but also that she felt more emotions for them than for her future husband. Suddenly, she froze in amazement, her expression changed dramatically, as if something had shocked her so much that it distracted her from her sad thoughts. Universe looked awkwardly at the princess. Maybe it seemed to him, but it seemed like their eyes met. The wind spirit walked to the edge, leaned over and squinted, peering intently into the crowd. She couldn't believe her eyes. Maybe it just seemed that way. The guy looked around carefully, trying to figure out what exactly the girl was looking at. However, the moment he realized that she was looking directly at him, his heart and mind were filled with warmth. He couldn't help but smile, and although it was a little awkward, he raised his hand and waved lightly at her. Suddenly, a sharp gust of wind arose, which blew away the people standing on the square. The hero even turned over in the air. It seems that something quickly headed towards the universe, smashing everything in its path with powerful gusts of wind. It was the princess herself. She was running with all her might, as if straight through the air, not noticing anything in her path. And while people froze in surprise, not understanding what was happening at all, Universe realized with horror that the princess, the spirit of the wind, was rushing straight towards him. Even his cloak did not help him blend into the crowd and hide from the eyes of others. The tears that formed on the girl's tender cheeks slowly rolled down, leaving wet traces behind them. But as soon as they reached her chin, they were immediately picked up by a strong wind, which easily carried them away. The girl, on whose cheeks a gentle and light blush played, had already almost achieved her cherished goal. The surprised guy, not understanding at all what was happening, spread his arms in order to catch the princess, who was already literally 1 meter away from him. She jumped into the young man's arms with great joy and enthusiasm, unexpectedly knocking him off his feet and leaving him barely able to stay on his feet. Typhon whirled joyfully, suddenly knocking people standing nearby off their feet with powerful and stormy streams of wind that echoed around, creating a sense of the power and grandeur of the elements. Stopping, still crying, she asked if it was really him. Why was he alive? The surprised young man, looking at her with bewilderment, did not understand at all where such thoughts and assumptions came from. However, the wind spirit explained that the hero had told her that during the campaign, the universe had disappeared. Meanwhile, the princess's future husband himself lay on the ceremonial square in complete shock from everything that had happened. Typhon tearfully admitted that if Universe was truly alive, there was absolutely no point in her getting married. Her heart was bursting with emotion, unable to calm down. The wind around her only grew stronger, as if reflecting her inner state. The young man noticed this too, when strong and powerful gusts of wind easily blew away everything that came their way, including not only light decorations and bushes, but even the guards. And while everyone around looked at each other in bewilderment and could not comprehend what was happening, the princess carefully took Universe by the hand and said that all this was not so important. Then, lifting his hands, she looked into his eyes with hope and asked if he would like to run away with her, leaving all this behind and going on an amazing adventure filled with freedom and new possibilities. The wind spirit did not wait for an answer. She, full of determination and persistence, grabbed the young man and dragged him to the side. At the moment, there was no time to think, as guards were rushing behind them, ready to catch them. Typhon, with full determination, picked up Universe in her arms and rushed away from the place of her wedding. Universe, surprised by what happened, froze in bewilderment, tightly clutching the princess's shoulders, unable to understand what was happening. Then, his face still twisted from not understanding the situation, and the guests and the savior of this world sat right on the floor and tried to comprehend what had just happened. The hero stared at his bride as petals continued to fly around him. A sudden anger gripped him, his eyes widened and his capillaries appeared like cracks. He clenched his jaw and clearly wanted to say something. Full of deep despair and anger, he furiously screamed insults at the universe. He waved his hand, addressing the guests in the square. He ordered them to grab the eared girl and universe. The spirits were simply horrified by such statements. How could he allow himself such an insult? One of the spirits, unable to bear what was happening, let out a loud and piercing cry, persistently calling the fleeing hero by his name. Braben turned around in confusion, not understanding what exactly was expected of him in this situation. However, the spirit said that he simply could not ignore what the young man had said about his bride. When Universe and Typhon ran out into the city, they were caught by the wedding carriage of Braben and his bride. The guy froze looking at it, paying special attention to the sign on the roof of the vehicle. However, when they got closer to the device found by Typhon, Universe recognized his creation in the horse that was harnessed to the map. It was the boy's friend, Trance. While Typhon climbed into the carriage, Universe stroked his friend. The girl only asked in surprise how he knew this horse, whether he had met him before. The boy agreed and explained that this was the first magical device he had created. Trance was with the hero's team from the beginning until the victory over the Demon King. The girl was surprised, but noticed that the horse had an engraving with a different name. The magical horse had an inscription on it that stated that this device was created by Gatsuan, who is the former head of the universe. The guy got angry. How could this be? It was, of course, his creation anyway, but it clearly didn't make him happy. However, the girl tore the guy away from petting the horse and said that he should quickly sit down too. The boys got into the cart and continued their escape, trying to get as far as possible from this place where they were in danger. Despite the fact that the horse was magical, it acted as if it were ordinary. Its hooves, as if unsuspecting, clicked on the ground, creating the usual sound that one would expect from any other, less mystical, steed. Meanwhile, Universe was thinking in his mind. He was surprised that the horse didn't speak, but probably they just cut out his voice module. The guy promised his friend that he would definitely fix it and erase this terrible engraving. Behind the couple, knights on horseback were already racing at full speed. They literally followed on the heels of the carriage in which the princess and Universe were sitting. When the guards had already begun to surround the cart, Typhon noticed this and called the guy. But it seemed that he also did not need an explanation and himself noticed the sad state of their affairs. The girl, clearly feeling upset and frustrated, could not contain her emotions. With tears welling up in her eyes, she exclaimed that with such a rapid development of events, they might be able to catch up very soon. The young man did not understand how this could be. Trance was made from the best parts that Universe had. Its speed should be much greater. Suddenly, the guy turned his gaze to the girl, who was looking ahead in confusion. Suddenly, he realized that Trance moves thanks to the powers of the spirits of the earth, and since Typhon is the spirit of the wind, they simply will not work to their full potential, because wind and earth are opposite elements. The girl answered Universe that she understood everything. But they did not have time to think and hesitate for long, because one of the guards on the horse-drawn carriage was already almost on the same level as the princess. Typhon noticed this, and sent a powerful stream of wind. It was so strong that it could be compared to a sucking funnel that swept away everything in its path. Probably, this guard did not have a chance to escape the inevitable fate. He and his cart turned over, screaming in surprise. The girl threw the reins to the guy, who, fortunately, caught them deftly. However, the young man did not even think about controlling the horse from the cart, as most people in his situation might have done. Instead, he quickly jumped straight onto the horse's back. Universe pressed himself against the horse. He praised him for the work he had done, and then he addressed the spirits of the earth inside the horse. He asked them to make an effort and do what he said. Suddenly, as if from the depths of the horse itself, muffled and mysterious voices were heard, reaching the surrounding world. These were the spirits of the earth who, having heard a familiar voice, decided to respond. Small creatures, which could rather be compared to dwarf gnomes, joyfully ran out to meet them and with great energy demonstrated all their boundless joy from meeting their dear and beloved friend. They climbed over the horse's back with measured ease and without much effort, not missing the opportunity to complain to the universe about how tired and exhausted they were, because this self-proclaimed hero was constantly riding them. The spirits of the land were filled with motivation and determination just from meeting their master. They decided that they had to show him what they were really capable of, and then they disappeared. Suddenly, the horse galloped much faster than before, as if it were a completely different steed. The cart it was pulling created clouds of dust and streams of wind, sweeping away everything in its path. Typhon, who was holding on to the chair, couldn't keep her hands still and tried to shout excitedly to the universe, telling them that they were going too fast. Suddenly, several guards appeared in carts ahead of the fleeing boys. They tried to block the road, not allowing the couple to pass. However, the magic horse was confident in its strength and continued to rush forward. He struck down all the soldiers, including their horses and carts, with such force that they flew through the air for several meters before falling to the ground with a crash. As a result of such a powerful force, the carriage with Typhon itself was lifted into the air, and even Universe himself, who was sitting on his horse at the time of the incident, was also lifted above the ground. They landed back on the ground and continued moving forward just as quickly. The princess and the boy were barely holding on to their places, clinging tightly to whatever they could. Typhon, full of joy and excitement, shouted joyfully, waving both hands in the air, enthusiastically expressing her emotions. She spoke enthusiastically about how magnificent and amazing it was, and encouraged the horse to gallop even faster. She accidentally pressed the button and didn't even notice that she had started some mechanism. The bright sign about the princess and Braban's wedding rose higher, and from the pipe behind it something went boom and scattered around the area. These were magnificent flower petals that gently showered upon Typhon and Universe, creating a mesmerizing atmosphere around them. At such a moment, they could not help but raise their heads and look at the wonderful sight in amazement. But that was not all. Beautiful devices attached to ribbons fell out of the compartment behind their carriage. They hit the ground, making a loud and pleasant melodic sound. From the outside it looked very unusual. Typhon, the spirit of the wind, was riding on the seat of the wedding carriage, Universe was sitting on the horse, and the carriage, surrounded by flower petals and enveloped in melodic music, rushed forward. Passers-by on the street began to notice this incredibly impressive spectacle that was unfolding before their eyes. Even those who initially did not notice eventually turned around, attracted by the melody reaching them. They remained in their places, not daring to approach, and discussed what was before their eyes. They immediately realized that this was the wedding carriage of the hero and the spirit princess, but they were more surprised that on the horse was not a hero, but some young man. The couple flew past a street filled with people who stopped to watch this interesting spectacle. However, Typhon did not care. She was happy like a little child, and the whole situation was very funny to her. However, people were also punished for their curiosity, albeit not intentionally, but from the carriage rushing at great speed, they were overtaken by strong gusts of wind, which literally swept them off their feet. Iphone continued to sincerely rejoice at this moment, filling the space around her with positive emotions and light, while Universe only smiled slightly at her in response, showing that he was pleased to see her happiness. Suddenly, the spirits of the earth began to correct something in the wedding sign, which was in a beautiful, carved frame. Universe noticed this and watched with surprise at what these spirits had in mind. Pleased with their work, the spirits of the earth showed it to the Universe, and the sign now bore the inscription that this was the love carriage of the Universe and his friends. The spirit with a majestic bearing confidently stood face to face with Braban, and, full of determination, demanded an explanation from him regarding the harsh and unacceptable words he had spoken earlier. He even repeated the insulting remark the hero had made to their princess, as if angrily asking if he had misheard. His words sounded as if he couldn't believe that such a thing had happened. He looked sternly at Braban and made a remark to him, noting that he would not allow the princess, the spirit of the wind, to be called that way. Even for such a great hero as he, it was simply unforgivable. The hero grimaced with obvious displeasure and clicked his tongue, demonstrating his displeasure. He categorically did not like such remarks addressed to him, and he felt that everything that was happening was inappropriate. He did not consider these spirits to be people, let alone respect them. He turned around and, as he left, said that now we need to think not about this, but about how to capture this creature and the universe as quickly as possible. But the wind spirit didn't calm down at all. He asked again who they needed to catch, if it wasn't Universe. Braban's face expressed obvious dissatisfaction with the fact that this guy didn't want to lag behind. Later he added, wasn't it the hero himself who said that the universe was dead? The young man froze, not even turning towards the spirit, he just listened silently. He turned half around and, showing complete disrespect, decided to parody the spirit. He mumbled something, rolling his eyes. However, the guy did not pay any attention to this. He already ran to the other spirits, saying that he was glad to see the universe. Braban put his hands on his hips and arrogantly raised his head and asked why they were discussing all sorts of non-humans. In the hero's opinion, all the disgusting people in this world are called Universe. This name is the most disgusting. The spirits instantly turned towards Braban as if on command. Mixed emotions could be read in their eyes, bewilderment, which was almost clearly visible on their faces, and strong anger, which gave them a frightening appearance. They rushed to the hero asking who else was disgusting here, how he dared to call their good friend names. The guy clearly did not expect such a reaction. He awkwardly put his hands out as if defending himself and tried to find words to resolve the situation. The spirit of the wind, full of rage and determination, screamed. Typhon agreed to marry Braban only because such was supposedly the will of the universe who died in the campaign, and now it turns out they were lied to all this time. He promised that they would conduct a thorough investigation, and from now on, they would never trust the hero. Brayban twisted his face in anger and incomprehension of why they had latched onto this universe at all. The spirits left the square and assured that if Universe was really alive, the hero could prepare for the worst. Brayban was left alone, watching them with a surprised look. After some time, Typhon and her companion broke away from the pursuit by driving into the forest. The guy stood bent over to rest, and the girl meanwhile cheerfully jumped off the carriage. The spirits of the earth burst into tears. They were very glad to finally meet their master alive, because, like everyone else, they thought that he had died. Universe patted one of the spirits on the head and thanked him for his help. Typhon was touched by such a picture, and so she also smiled contentedly. However, the girl looked suspiciously at the way the young man stroked the spirits of the earth. It seemed as if she also wanted such touches from her friend, but did not dare to say so. The guy seemed to notice this request in her gaze and put his hand on her head, saying thank you to the spirit of the wind. The princess smiled and, unable to contain her strong joy, twitched her unusual ears quite contentedly. Universe smiled at this sight, but a little later, he still asked her if she was sure that it was worth running away from the wedding. The girl puffed out her cheeks and looked away, explaining that she had already decided everything, and what's more, she ran away not with someone but with the universe itself. If only the young man knew how the girl could not find a place for herself after the news of his disappearance. The princess bowed her head in embarrassment, a slight blush covering her cheeks. She stuttered as she tried to say that she loved Universe, and although it was difficult for her to say it, she still managed to say it. As if not quite understanding the meaning of the girl's words, the young man smiled at her and said that he loved her too. The girl's face turned completely red, and she herself was very surprised by such an answer, and therefore screamed. Now the spirits of the earth looked at the boy awkwardly, as if asking for the same words from the boy. Universe quickly understood from the look of the spirits what they wanted and confessed his love to them. Typhon looked at the young man with resentment. She blushed again and said that Universe was a fool, but she couldn't hold back her emotions. In a fit of resentment towards the guy, she raised her fist to hit him. The guy raised his hands in bewilderment, trying to defend himself a little. However, at the most unexpected moment, the girl, without thinking, suddenly grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and tilted her head in his direction. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she sincerely admitted that she was very glad that Universe remained alive. The young man with kind eyes allowed the beautiful princess to cuddle up to him, feeling the warmth and trust in this moment, and at the same time, he once again sincerely thanked her. When Typhon calmed down and sat down on a nearby stump, Universe asked what they were going to do next. It seemed that the girl also had no ideas and asked what the guy himself wanted to do. He replied that he would like to patch up Trans first, as he was currently in a terrible state. Universe checked the engraving on the horse with his hand, and noted that in order to erase this inscription, one must go to the land of the water spirits, Konkontavare. Since the engraving was made by strong fire spirits, one would need the power of a water spirit of no less power. Typhon jumped up and down excitedly and said that she would go with the boy. He asked again if the girl was sure that she did not want to return to her homeland, but the princess assured him that since the wind spirits were everywhere, then her homeland would quickly find out where she was. The girl carefully approached the young man and asked again if he was ready to take her with him, to which he replied that he did not know at all how he could refuse her in her desires. The princess raised her fist to the sky with delight and inspiration and shouted that everything was decided. They were starting their adventure, and their first goal would be the land of the water spirits, Konkontawara. The guy in gloves was sorting through some papers, and then, clearly dissatisfied with what he had read, he angrily crumpled the paper, as if it was the one to blame for his problems. It was Brainbam. He was laughing evilly and calming himself down by saying that he would catch Universe and his bride and then make them lick his boots. Maybe he was mad from such humiliation, or maybe he was like that before. Typhon, bending down, smiled sweetly, radiating goodwill. She, addressing the spirits of the earth with gratitude and admiration, expressed that she was very glad to have the opportunity to meet them. But it seemed that the spirits of the earth themselves were very nervous about the unexpected appeal to them from the princess, the spirit of the wind. They were shaking with fear, but still managed to utter one modest greeting. Universe calmed the boys down a bit. He turned to Typhon and explained that if the girl was going with him, she would be better off getting along with other spirits, regardless of their elements. After which he pointed his finger forward and added with a suspicious look that these would be his conditions. The girl, without any hesitation, assured that she agreed and everything would be fine. They could already set off on their way. However, Universe asked her not to hurry so much. From which the girl herself looked at the guy in surprise, not understanding what was preventing their departure this time. The young man said that Typhon should first change her clothes, because in her wedding outfit the princess would stand out from the crowd and would attract a lot of unnecessary attention. The girl agreed and immediately rushed into the carriage to change. She was already impatient to begin the journey, and therefore there was no time to hesitate. The guy froze in surprise, listening to how much noise the girl made while changing clothes. It felt like she was about to smash the whole carriage. Universe exhaled and was about to figure out what else they needed to do before starting their journey, but he was distracted by Typhon, who was calling his name loudly and clearly. The princess had already changed and was showing off her outfit to Universe, pleased with herself. She winked at the guy and smiled widely, clearly expecting a positive reaction. But the first thing that caught Universe's eye was the magic bracelet on the princess's hand. He asked if it seemed to him that the girl was still wearing the bracelet he knew. Typhon began to examine her bracelet and said that of course she wears it, because Universe himself gave it to her. The guy was happy about it and smiled at the girl, but it seemed that she was worried about something and was about to say something. The girl folded her hands in front of herself and, having demonstrated her narad, nevertheless asked the guy again how he liked her image. She really wanted to receive pleasant words from a person who was important to her. Then the young man noted that the princess looked very beautiful and that this outfit suited her very well, which certainly made the girl very happy. She smiled enthusiastically at the young man. The girl noted that she was very nervous because it was the first time she was wearing clothes in such a style, and her face showed calmness from the guy's words. Universe confirmed that it was indeed the first time he saw her in such an image. The princess, slightly looking away, feeling slightly embarrassed, admitted that she would like the young man to be able to see all possible aspects and sides of her personality during this trip. But suddenly she waved her hand in front of the guy, pointing to the carriage, and asked if he wanted to change clothes too, because there were still a lot of different things inside. Universe thought about the princess's words. The couple entered the carriage, which turned out to be anything but ordinary. Universe immediately noticed that there was definitely some very strong magic involved. There was a whole huge room inside it. He looked around in surprise, noticing that there was not just one room, but a whole palace. Universe did not understand why the hero needed so many rooms, as if he wanted to spend his honeymoon with 8 princesses at once. However, the girl standing at the door called out to the guy. She opened the door, and inside was a spacious bedroom. Typhon, having collected her thoughts, confidently walked up to the closet and opened it. It was overflowing with various things. The closet that was in the room was filled to the brim with numerous and very expensive things that attracted attention with their magnificence and value. The wind spirit, filled with joy and enthusiasm, with a bright gleam in her eyes, asked the boy about his opinion about these outfits, but the young man clearly did not like them, and so he asked with an indifferent face to end it there. The couple went outside and began to discuss that the inside of the carriage was fine, but its exterior definitely needed to be addressed, perhaps boarded up, but where could they get them? But Universe had already figured out that there were many trees around them, which Typhon picked up and assured them that the spirits of the forest would certainly share with them. The princess proudly pounded her chest, demonstrating her confidence and determination, and then insistently asked to grant her this, because the wind spirits get along well with the forest spirits. She grabbed the strong axe with full confidence and determination, and filled with determination, she quickly headed towards the nearby trees. Her intention was to ask these majestic trees for help. However, it seems that something did not go according to plan. After a short conversation with the spirits of the forest, Typhon, sadly clutching an axe, moved her legs towards the universe. She lowered her head to the ground and lost all enthusiasm. Typhon approached the guy and said that they would not succeed because the spirits would be in pain and therefore they should abandon this idea. The girl's disappointment knew no bounds. Universe walked behind the girl and headed towards the trees himself with the firm intention of finding a way to negotiate because perhaps he would succeed, which meant it was worth trying. The young man stopped in front of the nearest tree and looked at it carefully while a light breeze blew the leaves of the trees around him. He smiled and, raising his gaze to the top of the tree, which spread its branches upward, respectfully greeted the spirits of the forest, expecting them to respond to him with their presence and blessing. Voices were heard from inside the tree. Spirits could be heard talking to each other, assuming that it was Mr. Universe himself. The guy asked how they knew him, to which the spirits assured him that there were no trees in this country that did not know him. All the trees are connected by a root system, and this is how they transmit important information to each other, explained one of the forest spirits, appearing on a tree. Universe confidently made his request. He squirmed for the disturbance and said that he needed to chop wood, but he did not know what to do so as not to harm the spirits. The spirit of the forest joyfully spread out the branches that resembled hands and, surprised, declared that the universe really is what they say it is. Most people wouldn't even ask permission but would simply cut down the trees on a whim. The guy thought, maybe it's because most ordinary people don't see these spirits, and Typhon isn't such an outstanding spirit according to universe. The spirit of the forest added that he is ready to convey the words of all those whom people use. As wood, they say that the wood is strong and durable, so they are happy to help people for so long and allow them to be used. They are happy to serve people. The axe, with its sharp blade and excellent balance, cut through the hard wood with a sharp and surprising ease, as if it were made of paper, without causing any difficulty. Having placed the log on the stump, the boys began to chop it down. Universe held the piece of wood tightly, while Typhon, with admiration, boldly aimed to deliver a strong blow with the axe. After which the boys, together with the spirits of the earth, reconstructed the carriage by nailing the resulting boards to the base of the carriage. When the work was finished, everyone was jubilant, giving each other high fives. They were finally finished and seemed even proud of the result of the work done. Universe said what was on everyone's mind. He stated that the work was excellent. Jumped up again in admiration, raising her fist up, she seemed to be the happiest of all, although perhaps she was simply more emotional than the other spirits and the universe itself. The boy noticed shackles attached to a wooden post at the corner of the carriage and asked Typhona in surprise what they were. The girl raised her head, showing with her whole appearance that this thing evoked in her only negative emotions and even disgust. She explained to her companion that when a spirit who had become a servant made a mistake, he was chained with this device so that he would realize his guilt and repent. Braven was beside himself with such a wonderful idea. The young man sternly declared that it was simply terrible that the hero could even think of such a thing. Meanwhile, Typhon listened attentively to what the boy thought about this. She smiled happily. It seemed that this was the answer she was expecting from her companion. But Universe was puzzled as to why the girl was giggling at his words. Had he really said something wrong? But the princess explained that people in this world generally look at spirits as lower class, mere trash, but she is very happy that Universe is not like that. She smiled warmly as she looked at the young man. The guy added that he considers any life valuable and important, regardless of what class it belongs to. The girl added that the guy was respectful to the forest spirits as well. It seems that she sincerely admired and was devoted to Universe for what a kind and unique person he is. The wind spirit gave Universe her most sincere and beautiful smile and expressed her gratitude for the fact that he appreciated them all, each of the spirits he met along the way. The girl's words touched the guy, and her smile made him look away a little embarrassed. He awkwardly turned away and suggested to the girl that they should set off already. She agreed with a bright smile and enthusiastically asked Trans to go ahead. If this magical horse were in its best condition, the journey would not take even a day, but now the guys will have to travel for at least 3 days, because of what was done to the horse while it was separated from the universe. But the guy also noted that they would need 3 days at best, and that was if nothing happened on their way. However, someone in armor was already standing near the carriage. These were the knights sent by Bravan to retrieve his fiancée and former comrade. The soldiers quickly relayed information about the carriage's destination to their superiors. Typhon noticed something was wrong and turned to Universe with her concerns, but the guy also managed to notice it. When there was only a little bit left to the border, the carriage of the escapees was surrounded by knights of the kingdom ready to prevent them from crossing the border. Typhon and Universe realized that now they would have to fight their way through again by force, because they simply had no way to retreat or bypass the enemies. Universe turned to his horse and asked him to help in the current situation. He also addressed the spirits of the earth and said that he was counting on them too. They immediately jumped up and enthusiastically shouted that they would definitely help. The carriage sped up again and the boys rushed forward. The bright sun was shining behind them, and the knights in horse-drawn carriages were already getting closer and closer. When the crowd of guards was already a few meters away from the carriage, Typhon and Universe resolutely leaned forward, preparing for a collision. They tore down the obstacle in their path with a deafening roar, and when they broke through, the princess boldly climbed onto the roof, throwing several powerful streams of wind after them so that they would have a little more advantage. Sitting down in her place, the girl praised Universe and encouraged Trans, persuading him to rush forward even faster. However, the young man noticed something ahead and peered into the distance with determination. right on the border of the state, some kind of wall appeared, which completely blocked the exit and continued in the form of stones and hills, typical of this rocky area. It wasn't even just a wall, but sharp spears tightly tied together. They were arranged in such a way that if you tried to ram them, you could damage your horse. Typhon was clearly nervous. She was worriedly stating the fact that, unfortunately, trans would no longer be able to help them here. Then a great idea came to the young man's mind. He turned to the wind spirit and asked her to use her powers to solve this problem. He was shouting quite loudly, because at that speed it was hard to understand what he was saying. The guy suggested using the power of the wind to lift the carriage into the air. The girl, in a state of surprise and at the same time experiencing inner confusion, quietly muttered that she probably wouldn't be able to accomplish this. However, Universe was not going to give up and continue to insist on his opinion. He persistently persuaded the girl to at least just try and added that he was counting on her. Her face suddenly became slightly flushed from the pleasant and warm words that Universe had spoken, and she replied that she would try to fulfill his request, since she could not ignore his persistent appeal. The girl screamed loudly, putting her hands to her mouth to make the sound carry even further. She called to the other wind spirits and asked them to lend her their power for a while. The little lights, like magnets, hearing the girl's trembling call, began to gather together, rapidly flying in from all sides and filling the space around with amazing light. The princess carefully put her palms forward, trying to catch the spirits who wanted to provide her with support and assistance on her difficult journey. Typhon turned her gaze to Universe in frustration. It seemed as if she was ready to even cry from what was happening. The girl, unable to contain her emotions, cried out with bitterness and indignation that this would be too little to complete such a difficult task. However, the guy was not going to give up. He assumed that it should probably work if he gathered all the wind spirits together. After which he raised his index finger upward, clearly thinking of something. Universe said that if any of the wind spirits wanted to have fun, let them fly to his finger. The guy used gathering. This is one of the skills of the spirit tamer, the ability to gather spirits on a raised finger. His desperate cry for help, coming from the depths of his soul, echoed throughout the area. The offer coming from the universe actually carried several hundred meters, allowing the spirits to pay attention to it. At first they remained silent and completely motionless, waiting for some signals or instructions, but soon one of the spirits, unable to bear the uncertainty, asked his comrades if the universe was calling them. Then dozens, maybe even hundreds of spirits flocked to one place, asking the same question as one: was it really the universe calling them? Typhon and her companion looked up in amazement, examining the little lights that were slowly flying in response to his call. However, the very next moment, the wind spirits clung not only to the boy's finger, but also to the surprised princess. The young man himself did not expect that so many spirits would respond to his call, after which he immediately remembered why he was doing this and asked Typhon to continue. The girl, feeling slightly offended and upset, puffed out her cheeks, as if trying to express her emotions, and, with some reluctance, agreed to the proposal. She turned to the spirits who had gathered around them, asking them to help her lift the cart they were riding on, as it was extremely necessary. Light and invisible spirits of the wind stretched in different directions, flying around the carriage and creating a mysterious and enchanting cloud around it. These magical air currents filled the space, creating a feeling of freedom and magic. The guys, full of determination and enthusiasm, were already preparing for the flight. A few moments later, the wheels of the carriage rose above the ground as if by magic, thanks to the inexplicable and amazing power of the spirits that inhabited this mysterious world. And then the whole carriage, together with Trans, flew up. Now the obstacle did not prevent them from leaving this kingdom. The soldiers who were pursuing the fleeing boys looked up in amazement. They clearly hadn't expected this, but the carriage was already high above their heads. While the boys were flying over the barrier, the knights were shouting loudly and even, it seemed, enthusiastically. It was the first time they had seen an entire carriage rise into the air. Typhon enjoyed the beautiful view, while Universe noted that they had now, fortunately, lost the chase. At that very moment, the boy suddenly froze, as if something had flashed before his eyes and caused him to stir internally. He felt something unusual that made him stop and wonder if it was just a coincidence. Now it was clear that Universe had noticed. Typhon carefully covered his hand with hers. The young man did not understand why the princess did this, and so he asked her. The girl blushed and hesitated, not knowing how to justify herself. But a great idea still popped into her head. Typhon said that it was dangerous here and she didn't want Universe to fall. As she said this, she blushed and looked away. The guy smiled at her and said that in that case he was grateful to her. And then he raised her hand, which he was already holding tightly in his own. Typhon was incredibly happy and delighted, so much so that it resembled the joy of a child who had just received a long-awaited gift. She could not hold back her smile, and her face glowed with pleasure. Universe looked ahead proudly, and Typhon simply smiled, enjoying the moment. It seemed that now she was more concerned not with the fact that they were flying, but with the fact that Universe was holding her hand. And although there are no roads in the sky, an endless space filled with unknown possibilities and freedom opened up before the fugitives. Their carriage, like a magic ship, continued to fly rapidly high in the air, already leaving this kingdom and all its problems behind. However, at the same time, in the majestic palace of the kingdom, important events were taking place that could significantly influence the future fate of the entire country. In one of its magnificently decorated halls, adorned with luxurious furnishings and an atmosphere of grandeur, an important meeting was taking place, devoted to the serious and disturbing subject of the abduction of Typhon. The hero, and also the next king of this place, gritting his teeth, asked those present why his bride and kidnapper had not yet been caught. Jitsuwa, who was already the Minister of Magic, volunteered to answer. He explained that there was no reason to worry because there were soldiers with the latest equipment which the minister had developed himself on the border. All that was left was to wait. Bryden breathed a sigh of relief, but the anger and worry did not disappear from his face. Suddenly a soldier entered the office and announced that the carriage with the princesses Typhon and Universe broke through the border, and now the fugitives were far beyond the kingdom. Jitsuwa jumped up from his seat. He was extremely surprised by such news and slapped the table, unable to contain his emotions. He asked how this was even possible, to which the knight awkwardly explained that their carriage had simply flown across the sky, bypassing that very new equipment and all the soldiers. But the Minister of Magic did not believe him and said that there was no need to pull the wool over his eyes, because carriages cannot fly. He asked if the knight had been bewitched to weave all sorts of nonsense, to which he received a clear negative answer. Then the future king slammed his fist on the table and said, Jitsuwa simply doesn't understand anything. Braban immediately realized that Typhon must have used the power of the wind to lift their carriage high into the air. Jitsuwa immediately covered his mouth with his hand and, having collected his thoughts, the only thing he could say, awkwardly stammering, was a phrase expressing understanding, although the minister himself clearly understood very little. He said with his hand on his heart that, as everyone knows, the magic horse that was harnessed to that carriage was made by the minister himself. Then Braban said that Jitsuwa completely incompetent once he let them go and asked what he was going to do. After an awkward pause, the Minister of Magic honestly admitted that he hadn't meant anything by it and simply wanted to remind him what a fine creation the horse was. Braban's face twisted in confusion. However, he laughed out loud and declared that he was actually crazy about the zombie search operation. Jitsuwa suggested distributing their portraits around the world via leaflets. Then everyone would be hunting for Universe's head, no matter if he was alive or not, and all that would be left for Braban to do is wait and get what he wanted, a reunion with Typhon. The future king hit the table again, which frightened Jitsuwa, who was already preparing to get it for his bad idea. However, Braban praised the minister and, smiling enthusiastically, noted that the idea was simply magnificent. Jitsuwa breathed a sigh of relief. He wanted Braban's approval and support so much that he was terribly nervous about offering his ideas. They had already started drawing up wanted posters, and Braban was thinking that he would never again be as disgraced as he had been at that moment when Princess Typhon escaped with this universe. Crossed his arms and thought that this situation would be resolved quickly, and, pleased with himself and the work he had done, he involuntarily grinned, although his smile was more like an evil grin. The very next day, the streets were filled with people going about their business. Braban was driving along one of these streets in his carriage, already impatient to see how the citizens would react to the announcement of the search for the kidnapper of Typhon's bride. The citizens looked at the announcement with interest. However, something was wrong. Next to the poster invented by Jitsuwa, there was another one. The citizens looked at the two ads with surprise. One said that they were looking for Typhon and Universe, and the other said that they were looking for the evil kidnapper of the princess, who was taken right from the wedding. Even the pictures were completely different. The poster, not made by Braban and his ministers, showed a smiling Typhona standing happily next to her friend. The hypothetical future king froze in horror. He had not expected this at all. Braban, considered stupid, seemed to laugh at him, arguing, which of this is true? The authors of the newspapers themselves probably did not decide. The men talked among themselves, assuming which of this is true. and it seems they came to the conclusion that the princess was not kidnapped at all, she probably just left with a certain universe. From such words the hero fell into a rage, which he even barely contained. But the men didn't stop. They talked about how shameful it was when your bride was taken away. Braben was clearly a weakling in their opinion, since he couldn't even keep his own bride. The citizens burst into loud laughter, repeating that even they would be better than him, and at least they. The girls standing nearby are looking at each other. The ladies who were standing nearby couldn't help but burst out laughing. The hero screamed in horror. How dare they insult him like that, calling him a weakling? The guy returned to the palace and abruptly, in a fit of rage, opened the door to the office, loudly calling for Gatsuan. However, there they were already waiting for him, and it was not his minister, but a crowd of spirits who were on the side of Typhon and the universe. When they noticed Braben entering, they immediately demanded an explanation from him. The spirits were holding posters in their hands, exactly the same as those hanging in the square. They surrounded the hero and said that now it was clear to them how he solves things, because from the very beginning he knew that their friend Universe was alive, and they also asked how to understand the inscription on the announcement, which said to find alive or not. They all didn't calm down, of course, because Braben turned out to be not a hero but a common liar. What was the portrait of Princess Typhona made to order by this guy worth? The Spirit King will definitely be furious, because this young man simply has no conscience, in which case their alliance with Typhon will simply be broken, and I wonder what Braben will do then. Full of rage and uncontrollable anger, Braben pointed his finger at the spirits and insulted them, saying that they should not make a mountain out of a molehill and break the alliance. After which, he also gave in to emotions, spread his arms out to the sides and declared the universe was simply shameless, after which he laughed loudly. The hero was no longer in control of himself. He declared that, if he only wanted to, he could easily wipe out the entire country of spirits in an instant, and added that they would all be easily piled into a mass grave. Hearing this, the offended defenders of Princess Typhon simply silently left the room, leaving the inadequate young man alone. He sighed with relief and rolled his eyes. He thought that it would have been nice if he had done this from the very beginning, because he would have saved himself from senseless conversations. Headed somewhere, he went to a distant door along the corridors of the castle. When he entered, he found himself in a dark office, with a man wearing a crown in the center. He said that he had just received a letter from the spirit world, informing him that their union had been dissolved. The guy didn't expect such decisive actions, and so he froze in his tracks while the king demanded an explanation of this situation from him. Braben, he tried to justify himself and explained that this was the price for the insolence of their ministers and the sins of all the spirits. However, the stern and taciturn man did not allow Braben to finish his thought, interrupting him mid-sentence and stopping the impudent young man with just one word. He stood there like a little boy who had been severely punished for some misbehavior, and stared at his father in utter confusion and bewilderment, unable to understand why exactly he had been so severely reprimanded. The king said that now that the demon lord had been defeated, all the countries in the world had acknowledged their power. All that was left was to force the spirit nations to submit to them, and Foolish would become an empire that would rule the world. It was simply unacceptable to miss such an opportunity. The king announced that he was also calling off his engagement to the spirit's daughter. Braben looked at his father in confusion, trying to find the right words to calm him down. The king, clenching his fist, declared that if his offspring did not agree with this, he was obliged to go and restore the alliance now, and then threw his useless son out the door. Braben found himself outside his father's office, and at that moment, the heavy door, as if fulfilling its role as a protector, slammed shut behind him, leaving him in a state of confusion and solitude. His face twisted in surprise and disappointment. He wondered why his father had called him simply useless and pathetic. The hero was surrounded by spirits who looked down on him. Their looks were full of contempt, and it seemed that they did not even want to pay attention to him, as if his presence was something extremely undesirable and unpleasant for them. The guy humbly bowed both his head and body, thereby showing his respect for the people who were in front of him. It was also a sign of deep repentance and sincere apology. He forced out the words that he was very sorry and offered his deepest apologies for his rash and rude words. Although he himself was filled with rage and despair, biting his lip hard to keep his emotions from spilling out, he was only thinking about the fact that he couldn't let the pathetic universe take away Princess Typhon, who he needed so much. The spirits only chuckled. One of them stepped forward and, on behalf of everyone, declared that they all wished to hear a proper apology. The hero raised his head, unable to contain his anger, and then realizing that this was not appropriate, he quickly changed his facial expression to a crooked, awkward smile. he proudly declared that they could not demand a sincere apology from him when they themselves did not even bow their heads. They asked for sincerity, but they themselves did not even show a drop of respect. The spirits clearly didn't like this statement, which is why they immediately started to discuss how to remove the hero title from this guy. They also noted that he should apologize not only to them. The hero was already having a hard time holding himself back. The veins on his face were showing, and he continued to bite his lips. He mentally asked them if they really didn't see anything in him except trash, but he didn't dare ask. With trembling hands, he touched the floor, changing his position for the proper apology that the spirit ministers were waiting for. The young man, who had fallen face down on the floor, declared that he swears to return Universe to his homeland. He sincerely apologized and therefore asked not to break the alliance. The chief among the spirits again noted that Braben had misunderstood everything, that he should not apologize to them, but to the universe and Princess Typhon. The order to apologize to both culprits of his sad situation only angered the hero even more. He raised his head and said that he would definitely apologize to them when he returned to his homeland, because if he apologized now, they still would not hear him, which meant that everything would be in vain. One of the spirits said that there was sense in an apology now, as well as a way to deliver his words to their ears. But above all, they themselves wanted to be sure of the sincerity of all the words spoken by the hero. Gritting his teeth in a fit of rage, Braben thought about how they were all just joking with him. How could he apologize to such scum? It was simply an unacceptable humiliation for him. He reassured himself that they were not here, and that there was no way to convey his words to them. Then he squeezed out the question that worried him most: if he apologized, would the spirits maintain the union? Then the ministers standing proudly before him assured him that, unlike him, they always kept their word. Crouching down from trying to contain his anger, the young man forced out the words that he was wrong and would no longer force Typhon to do anything, and also if she made a mistake, he would not blame her and humbly asked her to return. The spirits froze from this, surprised by the new details of the relationship between the princess and Braben, about which they still did not know everything. The guy realized that he had said too much and, getting nervous, bit his lip, so that a red, burning liquid immediately gushed out from there, but the hero didn't even notice it. He continued his speech. From his lips, a request sounded to return and, universe, he explained that he had treated him incorrectly and called him to return to work, and then for greater effect, he added that he would fire Gatsuon and make the guy a minister. The hero was obviously very nervous, because this was the first emotional speech with an apology in his life. From the restrained anger, the capillaries in his eyes burst and the same red streaks began to ooze out of them. While the distraught hero continued to hold a smile, the spirits crowded around the strange device, discussing that it had turned out very well. In desperation, Braben pointed to this device and asked what it was. Then the spirit answered him that it was a magical device that would transmit everything said directly to the universe. The spirit also added that, unlike photographs, the tool is ideal for recording movements and sound. Meanwhile, a recording of Braben's apology was playing on the device itself. The spirits were already leaving the hero sitting alone on the floor in complete shock from what had happened. They were enthusiastically discussing that they would ask a journalist friend to send this recording to all countries. Suddenly, the young man jumped up from his place and, like a wild animal, making strange sounds and growling, rushed towards the spirits, who ran away in horror. He grabbed the minister, who had a magical device in his hands, and when asked what he was going to do, he explained that he would destroy it, because if something like that were to spread, his reputation would be ruined. The other spirits looked at the guy with disdain. They took the device and were surprised that even in such a state he had the audacity to behave like that. To which Braben desperately declared that they had simply set him up. The spirits left the pathetic hero and assured him that the alliance between them had been restored. But the hero did not calm down and earnestly begged them to delete this shameful video with his apologies. When the spirits turned and walked away, he fell on his back like a small child. Braben twitched his arms and legs, twisted around on the floor, and cried out capriciously that they had to stop this and remove everything immediately. Meanwhile, the carriage with the fugitives was already driving through the territory of the kingdom of Vaswampu. Typhon joyfully exclaimed that she saw a pond ahead. The girl jumped up and down, not holding back her emotions, and showed her companion what she had seen. She, like a little girl, looked enchanted at the sparkling lake ahead, while Universe smiled at such a touching sight. He explained that Vaswampu is known for its many beautiful ponds and lakes. It is home to the largest lake in the world, so big that it looks more like a sea. The girl, hearing about this, became even more delighted and declared that she definitely wanted to see this amazing spectacle. Universe thought about it and understood, and indeed, since Typhon is the princess of the wind spirits, she has never even been to other countries. The young man said that although it was not quite on the way, they would definitely stop by to take a look. The princess smiled broadly and thanked Universe, and then added that she was also grateful to Trance, who was driving them. When they arrived at the place, they saw a huge poster attracting the attention of tourists, and behind it was the huge lake itself with a magnificent picturesque view. Typhon resolutely headed in its direction. On the shore of the lake, people were dancing and having fun. Some of them were drinking cocktails, while others were preparing a delicious dinner for themselves. Loud laughter and music were heard all over the beach. The girl was amazed to notice how cool it was here. People in bathing suits were passing by them, and right in front of them was a path to the lake. However, Universe did not quite share such joy and wanted to quickly run away from this place, but for the sake of Typhon, he kept silent. Full of determination and enthusiasm, the princess extended her hand to the guy and called him to quickly go further and also enjoy the evening, like all the other people who came to this place. When the boys were already heading into the very depths of the fun, they were stopped by a menacing man who called out to them from behind, so the boys stopped and turned to face him. The man in the hat and glasses sternly smoked his cigar and said that these two should not hurry for now and should stay where they were. It was Loquat who was in charge of the lake. He held up 2 fingers and explained that the entrance fee is 10,000 enda per person. It also includes a barbecue set and other things. Accordingly, he demanded 20,000 enda from 2 people. Universe and Typhon froze in surprise. Why is it so expensive? The guy tried to ask. Loquat smiled and explained that this was the price for heroes. Universe froze, remembering that this is what the prices for all goods and services related to heroes are called. They cost just crazy money. The young man went over in his head the cost of posters and signs with Braben's face. The man asked, Universe isn't a child, doesn't he have 20,000 enda? And when he heard silence in response, he sighed heavily. He suggested another option, which really upset the couple. Lokvat said that he would drop the price by half if they had a girl in a swimsuit with them, and if she was also beautiful and stylish, he was ready to give a free gift. Princess Typhon seemed to have something in mind. Her eyes sparkled and she turned to the Universe with determination. The girl asked him to wait a little and ran to the carriage in which the two had arrived. Loquat and Universe stood waiting, but a few moments later the princess appeared in front of them, apologizing for the long wait. She showed off her outfit shyly. Now it was clear that the girl had simply run to change into a bathing suit. The lake manager was delighted by this sight, and her companion froze in surprise. The bathing suit perfectly emphasized her figure. Loquat, with tears in his eyes from such a magnificent sight, showed 2 thumbs up and assured that it was simply incredible, and therefore the guys can go have fun. Typhon, pleased with herself, walked proudly, humming a melody to herself, while the young man trudged behind her, looking around. When they entered the beach, all the men immediately stared at the beautiful Typhon, not paying any attention to her companion. They surrounded her from all sides and bombarded her with questions about whether she was alone, where she came from, whether she wanted to relax with them, and one of the guys even asked, but he heard that spirits like to serve people, what does she like most? But the girl broke free and rushed to hug Universe, who froze, not understanding anything, saying that he was the only person she served. He looked away and thought that this was too harsh a statement. And then he noticed with surprise and shock how all these guys immediately looked to him with displeasure and dispersed along the beach. Typhon happily hugged Universe's hand. Pressing herself against him as tightly as possible, she was pleased with what she had told everyone. The guy himself breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that now they had one less problem. He suggested moving on, to which the satisfied girl agreed with a smile. She made a sweet face and suggested to the guy that since they had finally made it here, they should walk around and enjoy the views. The young man noticed out of the corner of his eye that the guys continued to discuss them, rudely pointing their fingers, after which he finally agreed with the girl and they moved forward at a calm pace. When they reached the shore of the lake, Typhon was delightedly surprised. It was the first time in her life that she had seen such a beautiful picturesque view. The girl noted that it was a little cooler near the water but still pleasant, and then Universe told her not to press so hard against him, otherwise she might get dirty. The guy explained that he was wearing work clothes that smelled of oil, but the princess was not embarrassed by this. She believes that everything is fine, because this is clear evidence of the Universe's diligent work with spirits. After which, pleased with herself, she decided that it would be better to press even closer to her companion, who could only awkwardly call her by name. But suddenly their conversation was interrupted by the loud rumbling of the girl's stomach, which clearly indicated that she was hungry. Typhon blushed in embarrassment and looked away, but the guy reacted calmly to this and noted that her stomach suggested that they had not eaten anything since this morning. And then, since they were already here, he suggested trying barbecue. The girl agreed, and her face showed impatience to quickly eat something tasty. The couple then reached the area with tables intended for preparing barbecue. They took a set of ingredients, mozon, which had a lot of different things in it. Typhon happily announced that she had already prepared everything, while the guy was preparing the barbecue grill. When the coals began to smolder, the guy noted that he had also prepared a grill for cooking. He confidently laid out the food on the grill, and the wonderful smell of fried meat began to spread throughout the area. It smelled so delicious that even the people at the neighboring tables stared at Universe. Juicy meat, fish, and even shrimp were fried on the grill, and the juice from them flowed onto the coals, burning and creating a wonderful aroma in the air. The group that sat near the couple fought the terrible desire to try these dishes, which looked very tasty, but still they did not dare to approach, because they did not consider themselves beggars. Universe gave the prepared portion to Typhon and warned her not to burn herself, because the dish was still very hot, which meant she had to eat it carefully. The girl, anticipating the magnificent taste of the prepared food, thanked the guy. She took a small piece of meat on her fork. Steam was coming from it, showing that the product had just been cooked, and how well the meat was cooked was shown by the juice that oozed and dripped right onto the floor. Typhon brought the piece of meat to her open mouth and tasted the food. After taking the first bite, the girl was very pleased. A soft blush appeared on her cheeks from the heat of the food. Typhon grabbed the meat with her teeth and slowly delayed the pleasure of eating the meat. After finishing the piece, the girl said with a face of complete admiration that it was very tasty. Saliva flowed from the corner of her mouth, and stars seemed to sparkle around her. Typhona jumped up to Universe with her eyes sparkling with joy and told him that it was the first time in her life that she had eaten such delicious food. The guy, confused, replied that she was overreacting. Universe, smiling, handed the girl a new portion of food and offered to try more. The girl was surprised by what was on the plate. Typhon brought a piece of seafood and said that those shrimps were so plump. Then she listed and she tried the shellfish and admired its softness. At the end she commented with a satisfied face that it was a real treat and greedily licked the tip of her fork. Other people on the beach watched the girl's meal, wanting to try it too. Universe noticed this and noted, thinking that the others had too much fire to make such a delicious barbecue. The guy continued to fry the seafood barbecue, mentally repeating that it should be fried in the heat of the coals, and not on an open fire, but still the most important thing was different. Universe replied that thanks to the spirits of fire and forest, they had the best barbecue in the world, and thanked them for working together. The boy stood aside and the spirits of the forest and fire replied that they should thank him. The spirit of fire continued to answer. She said that people thought they could make fire on their own and she had suffered enough ignorance, asking the spirit of the forest if she was right. The spirit of the forest replied that she was right and it would be wonderful to barbecue again with Mr. Universe. Fire replied that she agreed, but without him there was no way. The guy reasoned that by combining the powers of different spirits, one could increase their abilities and gain new ones, citing as an example the spirit of fire and forest, which provided warmth and tasty food. Universe thought, answering that when combining, it is worth considering that some spirits tend to conflict with each other, and it is better not to force them to do something against their will, because you can ask them to cooperate. The guy remembered how he asked the spirits for reconciliation using the powers of the spirit Tamer, from which they were able to find reconciliation and got along with each other, and became inseparable. The girl called out to the guy and asked him to open his mouth. Universe opened his mouth, and the girl, smiling, stuck the food inside with a fork. Typhon said that since he had prepared the food, she should feed it to him and asked if it was tasty. The guy, chewing, answered the girl with a nod. The guy thought that the taste was still different, looking at the sky. Universe thought that the mozon on this lake tasted like the best steak. The guy looked back and saw a poster. The poster showed a guy in a raincoat holding a fish in his hands. There were people next to him. Just above the picture was a list of the ratings for the fish caught by their weight. In first place was 70 kilograms. The guy thought that it looked like he took that picture. Typhon, holding a plate and fork, called out to Universe, and the guy answered. Universe smiled and said that he would now prepare a real mozon for her. The girl stood up in a stupor and asked, looking at the guy, if this mozon was not real. Universe answered that she was wrong, it was real, but there is something even better in this lake. The guys standing near the heroes mockingly asked if they wanted to catch a fish and if they could, and answered that you can die from a mozon bite, adding that the guy just wants to show off to his companion. The guys offered each other a bet on how Universe would die, one of them bet that he would drown, and the other bet that the guy would be bitten. The guys decided that whoever wins the argument will get Typhon. Everyone agreed, and some joined in. The girl looked at the guys angrily. Universe silently went to the lake. Coming up, he sat down next to the water. Universe started talking, looking into the water, that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, thus greeting the spirits. The guy asked if he could share the mason again like last time. The water began to react to the guy's words. A round outline of a face emerged from the water. It was the spirit of the lake. He smiled at the boy in a friendly manner. The spirit of the lake asked the universe if it was he who called him, and he was right. The spirit said that he had finally come. The boy looked at the spirit, smiling. The spirit of the lake said that he had just prepared a nice mozon for the guy, but warned that the fish was dangerous and the hero should stay away from the mason. The spirit finished by saying that the guy should just snap his finger and the mason would appear. Universe replied that he understood him. The guy started to walk away from the lake and people from afar asked if he had given up. Universe snapped his fingers with a satisfied expression. Air bubbles began to appear in the water. Suddenly, the lake became agitated and the water began to fly around in a circle. A huge fish jumped out of the water with a splash. Universe was not surprised by the mason, he just calmly rejoiced at the catch, and Typhon was pleasantly surprised and happy with the new food, while the other guys were shocked by the fish. A mason the size of a man and a half splashed onto the shore to the hero. Surprise and questions were heard from behind. The guys behind started pointing at the guy and wondering how he managed to catch such a catch by snapping his finger and criticizing him for his strange fishing. The guy didn't even look at them, but mentally answered that this fishing was with the help of spirits. Typhon happily folded her arms to her chest and looked at the hero, praising him for being so cool. While the guy was taking the fish by the tail, the girl next to him was jumping for joy. A crowd of young ladies in bathing suits ran up to the heroes from behind. The girls surrounded the heroes and flirted with the guy, praising him and saying that the one who caught such a big mozon cannot be a bad person, and they liked him. Typhon looked at the ladies with disgust and contempt for such behavior. The guys weighed the caught mozon and were surprised by the hundreds of kilograms of fish, saying that only a real hero could have such a catch. The young people tried to gain favor with the fisherman and turned to Universe, praising him for such work, saying that they did not doubt him for a second. The guy understood that they wanted to win him over with a lie, and he looked at the guys with contempt. The boys happily and grimacingly suggested to Universe that he should now share with them. The guys grabbed the fish and the knife and began to drag the mason towards them, but Typhon, noticing this, shouted and ordered them to stop. The girl pointed her finger at them with anger and irritation and asked who gave them the right to eat it. Typhon frowned and shouted what Universe had caught for her and pointed her fingers at herself. One of the guys replied that the carcass was too big for two and wondered why they didn't eat it altogether. The girl flatly refused. The girl angrily reminded the boys how they had mocked Universe before the fish was divided and ordered them to remember their words. The boys stared at the girl in confusion. The boys looked guiltily in different directions, just to avoid meeting Typhon's gaze, because they were ashamed. Lost in thought, the boys knelt before the heroes and asked for forgiveness, promising that this would not happen again. The girl answered menacingly for the hero, saying that she did not feel sincerity in their words, and ordered them to apologize again. The girl said that their heads should be lower and the bow should be synchronous. The guys followed the girl's instructions. Typhon frowned and replied that they would not see a mason until she heard the perfect apology. The guy smiled and laughed sheepishly. The girl raised her hands and shouted for them to repeat the apology again. Universe watched from the sidelines and wondered where Typhon learned to scold people like that. Now the poster featured a new picture of Universe and Typhon with a large 100-kilogram mozon in the first place. Universe was preparing a horse-drawn carriage for the road. The protagonist called Tiffany to go ahead, to which the girl agreed. Suddenly the couple was called out and the girl turned around. The young men and women from the beach said goodbye to the heroes and thanked them for the mozon, saying that now they would pass on the legend of Mr. Universe from mouth to mouth. The heroes sat in the carriage and waved in response to the farewell of the others. Sunset was approaching. Universe began to reason that he gave people only the skin of the fish. Typhon, with a disappointed face, added that it was only because she was a person and did not like her. The guy remembered that people ate fish skin with such pleasure. The guy said that the mozon he caught broke all records, and he put the remains in a special magic freezer. The girl raised her hands to the sky and happily replied that it was so cool, and and that she was so happy for the first time. Universe looked down and smiled, answering that it was good that they stopped there. The girl, looking at the hero, smiled back. Typhon leaned her head on her shoulder and closed her eyes. The girl thanked Universe for everything, and they rode on. The boy answered that it was time to sleep and there was a bed inside the carriage. The sun was approaching on the horizon. The guy noted that they were actively being searched for, and if they spent a long time in the carriage, they might be suspected of being a stolen hero card. The girl was surprised by such information. Typhon looked at the guy and said that wherever she was safe with the guy. Without looking up from the road, Universe replied that they needed to stop in the field. The guy thought about it and retracted his words, saying that there was a village nearby that he had passed when he was in the squad to fight the demons. Confirming his words, the guy said that they would stop there, in the village of the famous, Idon. The girl joyfully raised her fist up, saying that that was where they would go, and now they were heading for the village of Idon. Among the death houses there was a lonely path through the forest up the mountain where there was a lonely well. A terrible sound came from the well. The city of Idon. People were walking in crowds around the houses. Around the houses there were statues and a poster with a guy calling himself a hero and a girl. Universe and Typhon walked through the city and were surprised. The guy asked if they had really reached the place they were heading to. The girl smiled and said how many people there were. The couple looked at the statue and discussed it. The girl asked if it was a hero. The guy replied that it looked like he was. The girl hesitated and made a sound of surprise when she saw a statue of the guy's face with the hero's foot on it. Below the statue on the stand was the inscription Great Hero and Blockhead Universe. The girl asked if Universe was depicted under the hero's foot, to which she received a dubious agreement from the guy. Typhon, upset, approached the guy and said that it was terrible and Universe was not like that at all. The guy, closing his eyes, tried to calm the girl down, saying that it was just a small misunderstanding. Universe pointed his finger forward and suggested to go forward. The girl puffed out her cheeks in anger and turned away. A man with a bucket passed by the girl and accidentally touched the girl. The villager apologized to the girl, to which she replied that nothing terrible had happened. As he was leaving, the guy mumbled something about a well with water. The girl looked at the ground. In the village there was a guy who thought he was a hero. The hero, praising himself, said that it was time for such a wonderful and beautiful hero to come out. Typhon noticed the hero and was horrified, saying that he was here. The girl hid behind Universe. Universe looked with displeasure at the crowd where the hero was. The guy started to approach those people, addressing them. The people turned around. One of them, a man with a cane and a scarf on his head, remembered Universe. The guy backed away, and behind him stood Typhon. The old woman pointed her cane at the boy and asked the people if they remembered the idiot. Universe. Universe stuttered and said in confusion that it was him. The old woman smiled with her mouth, where you could count the teeth on your fingers, and answered that it was really him, saying that he had come without getting dusty. The old woman's face changed to an expression filled with disgust, and she said that Universe had greatly angered the spirit mistress Idon, and now the tale of the hero's exploits that he had saved in the village had scattered and begun to lure people to him. Universe stuttered, but said that they would like to stay there for the night. The old woman snapped at him for asking. The furious old woman said that Lady Idon had been in a bad mood lately and that their well was about to dry up. The old woman continued that if they allowed the criminal Universe to stay overnight at such a time, the village would be destroyed. The old woman with the staff turned away and said that now he was going to organize a meeting between the hero and Mrs. Idon, so that she would finally cheer up and start driving away Universe. The guy thought about what to do, because if she managed to organize a meeting between the hero and Idon, there would be a misunderstanding. Typhon from behind became interested in the situation. The girl thought that this was probably not the hero she was thinking about and looked behind Universe. The hero turned his attention to the girl and began to show off in front of her. Typhon grabbed Universe's cloak and was horrified because her hopes for another hero were instantly destroyed, and in front of her stood the very same person she hated. Universe asked the old woman to have a meeting with him. The old woman got even angrier and said that he had gone completely crazy. The villagers addressed the old woman as the leader. The old woman turned around at the words and asked what they wanted. The people answered that Universe helped them last time and he is not at all like a hero. The hero approached the villagers and thoughtfully raised his hand to his chin. He said that if he gave the boy to Idon and let her cook or bake him as she pleased, Universe might feel better. The old woman thought. The hero, thinking over the thought, screwed up his face and asked if this was not the ideal sacrifice. The hero added that after that he would throw Universe into the stable like a rag. The old woman approached Universe and said that he could stay the night with them, but first he should meet with Lady Idon. A group of people were climbing a mountain. A man with a lantern was walking in front, followed by the hero. Two guys were walking at the ends and carrying the head of the village. Universe and Typhon were walking last. The girl asked Universe if they were really coming to her. The guy turned his head to Typhon. The girl added that she thought those people were up to no good. The guy smiled at Typhon and told her not to say that because Idon was just a spirit and partly they were here now because he hadn't cleared up one misunderstanding. The girl looked at the guy with her mouth open in surprise. The old woman shone a flashlight and said that they had arrived. In front of them stood a well with a small wooden structure like a temple to a deity. Around the well stood statues and posters with a hero and a girl in his arms. Despite the surroundings, the well seemed gloomy and sounds were coming from it. The people standing nearby were shocked by the sounds from the well and stood in a stupor. The old woman pushed Universe in the back, telling him to finally come to the well. Universe looked at the well with a serious expression of divination and was silent. The guy moved forward. Typhon looked at Universe and was silent. Loud sounds came from the well and Universe stopped in shock. A group of people looked at the well in fear. Suddenly, a black hand appeared from the well, and then a head with long black hair began to appear. Something licked out of the well. The girl covered her entire face with her hair. Only one eye was visible from the shadow. Her gaze was filled with horror and aggression. She stretched her hand towards the people. Something like a girl grimaced and opened her mouth, stretching out her hand. Hair flew in different directions and a look filled with emptiness was visible. The girl screamed and the boys ran away from her. The girl with black hair only needed a hero. She aimed at the boy. The boy looked back and screamed in horror. The girl attacked the hero and put him on his shoulder blades. People turned to look and called out to the hero in horror. The guy lay under the girl, his face twisted in fear, and screamed. The girl held the hero with one hand and swung the other to strike. Something kept hitting the hero's face. The guy screamed and asked for help. The old woman, shaking with fear, asked Mrs. Idon to stop because she was beating the hero. The old woman pointed her finger at the couple, saying that the blockhead Unverse was standing there. The lady stopped beating the hero and began to slowly spell out the name of the universe. The hero was already unconscious. Ms. Idon turned around and smiled menacingly as she finished saying the boy's name. Universe and Typhon watched Idon in silence. The spirit lady quickly moved towards the couple and Typhon grabbed the boy by the shoulder in fear. Mrs. Idon's face suddenly changed into a sweet and joyful one. She raised her hands and said to Universe, addressing him as a gentleman, "Welcome back." The girl fell into the boy's arms and happily hugged him. Typhon stood in a stupor and opened her mouth in confusion. The people behind Typhon stood silently and were shocked by the situation. Returning to the past, the story with the hero and Universe was said to be like this. A group of heroes went to a village to borrow the power of the spirit of the well on the occasion of defeating the Lord of Demons. The hero's servant, Universe, poured poison into the well. The spirit of the well, Lady Idon, became furious. But when she saw the hero, her anger subsided. Out of pure love, Lady Idon swore eternal fidelity to the hero. Back to the present, the girl looked at the guy angrily and said his name. Ms. Idon pounced on Universe. The boy stood firm, not flinching from the attack. Typhon called out to the boy and rushed to his aid, but in an instant her gaze changed. The girl watched as Mrs. Idon hugged Universe and greeted him. Typhona looked at them and was surprised by what was happening. Lady Ida looked like a little girl, her ears were like gills, and instead of long hair she had a bob. She was dressed in a kimono with a bow on the back. She spoke about herself in the third person, that she could not believe that they met again and she was very happy to meet him. The hero came to and hiccuped when he saw what was happening. Lady Ida said that she had never forgotten about the universe and thought about it every night. Typhon was angry at what was happening behind him and asked in confusion how she dared to hug him. The villagers and the head of the village just stood silently and watched in confusion and surprise. The old woman shook and asked in confusion if Lady Idon didn't hate Universe. Mrs. Idon turned her head, answering the old woman that it was not so at all, because on the contrary, she adored Universe. The old woman with an anxious expression answered that the hero himself told her so. Mrs. Idon said that now she herself would tell how it really was. The hero's group of 4 people stopped at the well. The hero shouted into the well, ordering the spirit of the well to appear because the hero had come to her. The well was silent and nothing happened. The hero's face became angry from being ignored. The girl with the scarf on her head turned to the hero named Braven and handed over a vial of poison. Universe was then the fifth in their team and carried the load for them. The hero poured the poison into the well and turned to Universe and addressed him as a quiet man with a reproach for being late. An embittered Mrs. Idon climbed out of the well. She started attacking the hero while he defended himself and asked to stop. She put Braven on the ground, he asked to stop. Universe watched what was happening, confused. Night fell. Lady Idon was infected with poison, curled up, her knees drawn up and crying. Universe sat next to her. The girl said that if this continued, the village wells would also be poisoned. The guy with a sad expression on his face said that he was very sorry for the hero's actions, and he did not dare to ask her for forgiveness. He only asked for permission to do one thing. The girl asked what he was asking for. Universe raised his hands to the sky and shouted for the spirits to gather, and asked the girl if she agreed he would need her help. Lady Idon looked up and waited. Around the dark night, many fireflies appeared. The light gathered around Mrs. Idon, and she said with surprise that they were the spirits of the spring. The small spirits looked like little fairies. They healed Mrs. Idon of the poison, to which she said that the poison was being cleansed. In the eyes of Mrs. Idon, Universe became like a prince who saved the princess, and everything around sparkled like in a fairy tale. The guy extended his hand to her and said that now she was okay and they should go. The girl took her prince's hand and took a step forward. Ms. Idon and Universe began to fly into the sky holding hands and looking at each other in a special way. The residents, having heard the story, were disappointed and said how the hero could do such a thing, adding that after that Mrs. Idon began to love the ordinary worker. The girl still held the guy by the hem of his clothes, turned to the people and claimed that she had told everything, asking why they did not believe her. Mrs. Idon grabbed her forehead and began to lift her bangs. Under her bangs, the girl had a mark on her forehead. The hieroglyph meant well. The girl herself began to emit light from her small body. The residents began to cover their eyes with their hands, protecting themselves from the bright light. They said that the sign of Mrs. Idon, which shows the power of the lady, is now the highest level 4. The girl responded positively to their words, saying that she was now in a state of bliss because she was happy to reunite with the university. Lady Idon raised her hands to the sky and shouted that she was overflowing with power. The villagers looked up in the direction of her hands and waited with open mouths. Suddenly, water began to spurt out of the well behind the girl like a fountain. Residents who were on the street at that moment were surprised. Wells around the city began to overflow from overflowing water. People were happy for the hero who made Mrs. Idon happy again. One of the residents noted that perhaps the lady's mood had improved due to the beating of the careless hero. At that time, Braven was quietly trying to escape. Lady Idon told the village chief that she had to dispel the people's misconception that she adored not the hero but Universe. With a face full of confidence, the girl declared that when Universe was near, she would be full of joy and the well would never run dry. People bowed before Lady Idon. The guy was mentally happy that all the misunderstanding was cleared up. Suddenly, someone grabbed the Universe by the hand. The guy turned around to see who it was. Typhon was hugging Universe from behind and, embarrassed, puffed out her cheeks and turned away from the guy. Universe looked at his companion with puzzlement and asked what was troubling her. The girl shuddered and answered. Typhon grabbed the guy by the edge of his clothes and, embarrassed, looked down, saying that nothing like that bothered her. The village chief turned to Universe. She knelt before him and said that she offered her deepest apologies for her rudeness. The boy was embarrassed and confusedly replied that everything was fine. The old woman, smiling, said that Universe was their master and hero who saved their village. She asked him to feel at home. The leader began to lead the boys, saying that she would take them to the inn. The boy turned around and looked at Mrs. Idon. The girl was sitting quietly on the well and looking at Universe. Mrs. Ida said sadly that she could not leave the well. The boy smiled at her and replied that he would definitely drop in on her before leaving the village. Ms. Idon smiled sweetly at Universe's forgiveness. At the entrance to the hotel, the couple was met by a nice girl in a kimono. Greeting the guests, the girl asked them to have a good rest and warned them that there was no one there yet, as they were not yet open. The girl led the couple into the room, saying that she was the best in the house. Typhon immediately liked the room and began to spin around the floor. The girl turned to the hero Universe that they were primarily famous for their hotel baths, and in addition to the indoor ones, they had open baths right under the sky. At that moment, Typhon went out onto the balcony and looked down. Typhon asked the girl about the open-air baths. The guy suggested going for a swim. Typhon happily agreed to Universe's offer. The open-air bath was lined with wood. The water in the pool was so warm that steam was coming out. The boy was lounging in the bath next to the little spirits, saying how good it was for him there. Addressing the spirits, he said that they had worked well today. Meanwhile, the spirits were splashing in the water. Universe heard a sound from behind and turned around with interest. The guy saw someone walking towards him. The girl with her hair tied up and in a towel walked towards the bathhouse and smiled. The guy was surprised. Universe cursed and told Typhon that this was a men's bathhouse. The girl replied that there was no one in the women's bathhouse and she would be lonely there. The girl sat down and asked if they could join them since there was no one else there. The guy, confused, agreed to the girl's offer. Typhon slowly dipped her toes into the water. The girl completely immersed herself in the water and said how good it was there, as if all her tiredness had been taken away by hand. The guy, smiling, said that a lot had happened today and the girl agreed. Typhon said that she was scared to death when she thought that the hero was real because he was not like him at all. The girl looked ahead and said that the hero's aura was not up to par with the real thing. The guy thought about it and looked ahead. Universe replied that he had heard something about how humans and spirits saw things differently. Typhon looked at the boy. The girl stood up abruptly and pointed forward, saying that maybe that was where the fake hero was. Below the bathhouse, a beaten Breben was sitting on a chair and the girl was sitting on the ground next to him. The guy's face was swollen. The guy nudged the girl with his foot, asking why she was taking so long and ordering her to do her job faster. The girl humbly submitted to the fake hero. The people nearby whispered about how Mrs. Idon had beaten him so much and what others had said was true about the hero. The fake hero sat while the girl wiped the dirt off his face. Suddenly, the girl was stopped. The resident held the girl's hand and told her that she shouldn't do this and asked her to go back. The girl wanted to say something back to the guy, but she didn't. The beaten hero got angry and swore, saying how he dared to contradict him because he was a hero. The boys stood in front of the fake hero and objected to him. How could they court a man who insulted Mrs. Idon because the well could dry up again if she got offended by them? Breben jumped up from his chair and shouted that he would throw all their families out of the village because his parents were landowners. The boys walked without turning around, but the girl still looked back. The guy was puffed up with anger and cursed the inhabitants of the well. Water gushed out of the well like a fountain and the hero flew up into the air screaming. He said in fear that he would die of cold and asked for help. Universe and Typhon watched the show of the hero flying on water and ironically said that the babs here are pleasant and the landscapes are very interesting. The girl, wiping her hand, said that it was so lucky because she did not have to marry the hero and wash his back. Now the girl was very happy. The guy looked at the girl and smiled. The girl came to her senses and shuddered. Typhon splashed water and offered Universe to rub his back. The guy was confused and surprised by such an offer. Universe reminded her that she had just said that she didn't want to rub others' backs. The girl replied that this only concerned the hero because he treated them and the spirits badly, but Universe was not like that, and she wanted to somehow thank her companion for his kindness, even if it was small. Typhon smiled and kept offering the guy a favor. He thought about it and looked at the sky. The guy asked not to do it too hard. The girl agreed. The guy sat on a chair in a towel and waited to be rubbed. The girl was kneeling and smiling as she rubbed Universe's back. Typhon looked closely at the guy's scratched back. The girl shuddered and moved away, speaking about the guy's back. Universe was unperturbed. Typhon looked at the boy's back and asked why it was so wounded. The girl asked why there was a scar with the word stupid carved there. Universe began to explain that when he was on a campaign against the Demon Lord, he was always bait. He was always forced to open chests with traps looking for treasure in them, and there were simply moments when they took out their anger on him. While the guy was telling the story, the girl's face became sadder and sadder. Typhon, unable to bear it all, hugged the guy from behind, feeling sorry for him. The girl started to cry and said why, after everything he had been through, he tried so hard to help other people around him on the way, because the guy's wounds were much deeper. Universe smiled and replied that it wasn't so much his body that was the problem, but that he didn't want the spirits under his care or his inventions to be harmed, and that was why he wanted to take care of those around him. The girl listened, still crying. The girl pulled herself together and said that since the guy's body had been treated so badly, now she was next to him and would wash him well. The universe properly. The boy turned around and was surprised by such words. The girl and her little helpers began to actively wash the guy. The guy choked with laughter asking to stop washing. He felt ticklish and pleasant. The girl sat next to him with a smile. The boy returned to the room first and said that he was tired of laughing, but he had a good rest, and now it was time for him to make the futon before Typhon returned. Universe was walking with his eyes closed and drying his hair with a towel lying on his neck when he suddenly opened his eyes and stood in a stupor. There were 7 pretty girls in robes sitting around the guy's futon. The girls addressed Universe as Lord and said that he was the savior of their village, so they must guard his body tonight. One of the girls coquettishly asked him to accept their gratitude from the bottom of his heart. The guy was surprised and began to back away from the woman's hands. But the girls laid the guy down and began to surround him. One of the girls pulled the belt from the robe with her mouth. She looked at the guy shyly and unbuttoned her belt, exposing the guy's stomach and chest. The girl touched the boy's stomach with her hand. Universe closed his eyes and begged for salvation. Suddenly the girls were scattered around the room away from the guy. The girls started falling out of the window. Typhon viciously used her magic to protect Universe from the annoying ladies. The guy turned to the girl, adjusting his robe, and thanked the girl for saving him. Typhon stood in front of the guy and was embarrassed by his gaze. Her cheeks were red and she held the collar of her robe with her hand. The guy wanted to call out to the girl, but she interrupted him. Typhon knelt down and lowered her head down, saying that although her power was rough, she asked to take care of her. The girl smiled with a blush on her face and looked at the guy. Typhon said that Universe had always looked out for her and now it was her turn, she wanted to do it for him. The guy looked at her in confusion, while the girl looked away in embarrassment. Suddenly, Typhon abruptly moved from the floor to the futon and asked to be allowed to guard him at night so that the boy could get a good night's sleep. The guy asked the girl with an angry look if she even knew what it meant. The girl replied that she knew and started to take out a book. Typhon flipped through the page and looked for the paragraph on night guard. She started reading and said that first she had to lay the guy's head on her lap. She lifted her head and closed her eyes, inviting the guy to lie down on her. Universe lay down on the girl's lap. The girl was a little embarrassed, but went to look for the next step in the book. Typhon decided to check if the guy was comfortable, saying that she was asking this specifically before taking the next step. The guy made it clear with his silence that everything was fine. The girl thought about it and said that she needed to tell a decent night story. Typhon began to think what it could mean. The girl understood and began to tell. The guy looked at her from her lap. The girl made a scary face and began to tell a story that her friend, the spirit of Fuchi, told her, where they said that with the arrival of the night, the portrait in the girl's music room. The girl couldn't stand it and began to get embarrassed and fuss, criticizing herself for not being able to tell stories, and then she remembered. The guy closed his eyes and sighed, asking if she thought the night stories were ghost stories. Then he rose from his knees and hit his head hard. The girl leaned away from the guy, swinging her legs because of the numbness. She suffered because her legs were cramped. Universe turned and looked at the girl's behavior, smiling. The guy turned to the girl, but looking at her he saw how sweetly she was snoring. Commenting on her sleep, he said that she fell asleep so quickly, like a kitten. The guy looked at the girl and smiled. Universe came to his senses and thought about how long it had been since they had this much fun. He began to take out the blanket while the girl in her sleep thanked the guy and said that she was so happy next to him. The guy silently watched her and laid out the futon. Universe covered the sleeping girl and thanked her for such warm words. It was deep night outside. The guy wished his companion good night. Morning came and the boy began to wake up and get up from his futon. Everything around him was turned upside down. Universe went out onto the porch and saw Typhon sleeping on the broken wall. Fallen leaves lay around the sleepyhead. The guy picked up the girl without waking her. The village chief approached the couple from behind, wishing them a good morning. The old woman nodded and said that she noticed how much fun the couple had yesterday. She added that they had started doing some renovations today and that Mrs. Idon was working hard, so things were going well. The lady spirit told the workers that signs would also be useful and pointed forward. Typhon began to wake up. The girl looked forward and, flying away from the hands of Universe, was surprised, wondering what kind of picture this was. The chief replied that the painting was good and added that it showed Yunyars saving Lady Idon. The old woman said that the villagers had been drinking Lady Idon's water from the well all their lives. The leader said that the happiness of the residents directly depends on the happiness of Mrs. Idon, and she only just realized this. The grandmother bowed before the hero and said that from now on she would no longer honor the hero, because now she would only bow before Lady Idon and her beloved Uniers. Universe felt uncomfortable and asked not to do that. The leader smiled at the guy and said that she was sent by Mrs. Idon and asked to remind Universe not to forget to visit the lady. A couple of Typhon and Universe were going up the mountain to Lady Idona and were discussing the new posters that had been put up in the city. The girl said that on one of them she looked like the spirit of the earth, whose name was Nuru Kiara. Typhon smiled and said that this spirit was very popular among everyone. The guy answered that she was such a beauty to him. The boys approached the well. Mrs. Idon stood on the well opposite. The girl held a sword in her hands and said that she was waiting for Universe, adding the word Lord to his name. Ms. Idon began to explain that she held the legendary sacred sword of the well in her hands and asked Universe to take the sword with him. Typhon backed away in shock and began to speak. Universe's companion began to tell a legend that if the sword is pulled out of the well, water will gush out and the weapon will become a water sword, and recalled that people said that one could even cut the moon with just one swing. Lady Idon closed her eyes and replied that the girl was right. Universe asked why she wanted to give him such a valuable item, and began to explain that if the hero had ordered it, he would not have been able to return the sword to Lady Idon. The Lady of the Wells began to tell that when they set out on their journey, the hero again began to order her to give him the sacred sword and she refused him. Then the hero decided to pour the poison into the well again, and the new poison was much stronger than the previous one. The boy asked in amazement that the hero had poisoned Lady Idon's well again. The Lady Spirit answered the Universe that in order to survive herself and save the village well, she had to fall asleep at the very bottom of the well in the water. The lady stood at the edge and said that this was why she had allowed the well to dry up. The heroes listened silently, and Idon did not interrupt. The Lady Idon smiled and said that she had observed Universe's behavior yesterday and was once again convinced that he was the one who should wield the sacred sword Idon. Lady Idon's face suddenly changed to one of alarm. She asked to accept this sword, saying that it belonged to her, and again asked that Universe always keep the sword with him. Typhon looked at the guy with pity and also asked to accept Lady Idon's gift. The girls continued to ask, and the boy took the sword in both hands. Universe began to examine the sword more closely. Universe looked at Lady Idon and smilingly replied that he would take care of the sword she had given him. Mrs. Idon calmed down and tilted her head to the side, smiling at the guy's words. The Lady Spirit of the Well smilingly answered that everything was fine now. She continued to stand on the edge of the well. The girl spread her arms and began to dissolve in the magical light. The boys stood and did not understand what was happening. Typhon called out to the Lord Ida. Mrs. Ida began to slowly fly up, her body dissolving in space. Continuing to smile, she answered them that they would certainly see her again. Typhona began to say in worry that the lady knew that if she gave the sword, it would disappear. Universe called out to the Lady Odon in panic. The spirit watched them silently and smiled. Almost dissolving in the light, Idon replied that she was glad to meet them and thanked them for everything. She said goodbye to them. Typhona stretched her hand towards her and cried, asking her to wait because she couldn't just leave, saying that they were friends now. The guy looked sadly at Mrs. Idon. Somewhere in the mountains, a girl's cry was loudly heard. The sun was hiding in the mountains and sunset was approaching. The boys were going down to the village. Typhon was quietly crying and wiped her face from tears. Universe was silently walking next to her. Suddenly, a voice asked the girl why she was crying. Looking back, the girl was surprised to see Lady Idon sitting by the well. Typhon called out to Idon, to which the spirit shuddered. Typhon stood in a stupor and pointed her finger at Idon, saying that she had died. The guy silently watched what was happening with his mouth open in surprise. Lady Idon replied that she had indeed been in such a state yesterday that she wanted to die, but now she was at the height of happiness from meeting Universe. The Lady Spirit said quite happily that now she was not tied to the well in which the legendary sword was located, and now she could actively travel from well to another. Lady Idon thanked the boys for taking on such a burden as the sword and was happy. Typhon made a tear-stained face. She felt cheated. Universe laughed and was happy that everything was fine now. A thin-faced man dressed in uniform nervously hit the mechanism with the tip of a screwdriver. He thought that it was simply impossible to fire his great master Gotsuan and appoint him to the position of Minister of the Universe. The man mentally repeated that this simply could not be. Gotsuan stood by the car and fixed some spare part, thinking that he had finally earned such a position and Universe had brazenly stolen it from him, and now he needed to somehow compensate for his and the fake hero's past failures. The man pressed his face to his invention in concern and mentally said that he would do it even better and that now he would definitely succeed with that barbecue machine. In the nature next to the river on the grass stood a pillar arch with a sign that welcomed King Vaiswamp. Next to the arch stood guards and said that all the weddings of spirits were cancelled, but the festival in honor of the hero continues. Another knight answered that this festival is held in honor of the day of victory over the Lord of Demons. Gaotsan was clicking his barbecue tongs, and in the background the guards were continuing to talk about how this meeting could be considered a diplomatic meeting. Gaotsan stood up and addressed the king with heartfelt thanks for honoring them with his visit. At the table sat a gray-haired man with a thick mustache and a beach shirt with the face of a hero. Gokun began to say that tonight's dinner would feature premium products of their own making, and they would be grilled on a grill they had created themselves. King Voswamp, smiling, replied that it was very interesting because it was the last work of Minister Gotsuan, who was considered the best magical engineer in the world. Gotsuan replied that he had heard people complain about the difficulty of controlling the flame on their grilling devices, so he did it. He picked up the tongs and confidently said that all you had to do was simply put in the ingredients and turn on the device, and a barbecue worthy of the hero himself would be ready. The king was surprised by such words and stood up from his chair. The man suggested that the king try out the new technology himself and asked him to turn the handle of the mechanism. The king agreed, and turning the handle said that this was the ignition system. The equipment exploded right in front of the king's face. People around were shocked. The king began to burn with intense flames and scream. People called out to his majesty. The king ducked into the water. The king's vassals began to scold and accuse Gotsuan, saying that he had tried to make an attempt on his majesty's life and that it had all been planned because he had forced the king to turn the handle. The king lay on the ground and the healer treated him. The man raised his hands and answered that they were wrong and that it could not have been an assassination attempt, and in his mind he remembered that at home when he tested the device there was no such effect. He thought why this happened now. The spirits, embittered under the grill, answered that Gotsuan fired Universe and then appropriated his merits for himself. The spirits of fire and forest twisted their faces in rage and replied that it was simply unforgivable. The vassal rushed at Gotsuan and shouted that the culprit would now get what he deserved. Gotsuan fell to the ground, covering himself with his hands and shouting. Suddenly, someone called out to the men. The king wiped his face and said that any genius can fail, even the most famous one like Gotsuan. The vassal stopped and turned around, calling out to his royal majesty. The king paid attention. Gotsuan began to explain to the king that he was sorry and that he was not the culprit at all. Gotsuan, kneeling, said that this invention was not made by him, because the master was the same Universe who kidnapped the Princess of Spirits. He artistically let a tear run down his face and directed all the blame at Universe, saying that he washed away the murder of the king with his invention, and Gotsuan knew nothing about it. The king, confused, asked, hadn't Gotsuan said that he had invented the grill and that the engraving on the device had his name on it? The man realized that he had been caught in a lie. The hero stood up from his chair and told him not to make a fool of himself and that he should simply admit his guilt. Gotsuan was shocked by his old comrade's words. Bribin looked angrily at Gotsuan and thought that this incompetent minister needed to be gotten rid of as soon as possible because he was putting everyone in danger. The accused nervously bit the tip of his fingernail and thought. He remembered that after defeating the demon lord, he and the hero ate barbecue together and celebrated every day and set fire to Universe's clothes together in amusement. Gotsuan began to answer that in fact it was Bribin's order and he had confirmed that it was necessary to surprise people by setting them on fire with a barbecue device. Gutsan's impudence and shouted at him. Bribin began to approach the man and angrily asked what he was talking about and answered that he would show him now. Gutsan grabbed the hero by the neck with his hand and bent him towards himself. Gotsuan whispered his plan to the hero, that if he admitted guilt, he would also be held accountable. The plan was to get closer to King Wazvampu's circle. The hero did not understand what the man was talking about. Afterwards, Gotsuan began to say that he should look at how young the king was dressed, and if they lit up in a youthful manner, then his majesty would definitely be pleased. The king stood silently and watched what was happening with disappointment. Having agreed, Brabin and Gotsuan began their insidious performance. The former enthusiastically presented barbecue as the greatest invention of the era, deliberately admiring loudly. The latter immediately picked up the game, shouting out feigned words of surprise. The said hero approached the king, placing his hand on his shoulder with ostentatious familiarity, and declared that even such a dandy was now aware of this. The other immediately followed his example, and with false enthusiasm exclaimed, "Keep it up." However, King Wazwamp, instead of the expected surprise, harshly and indifferently accused both of cruel actions, hurting people without subsequent apologies. He also stated that they use arson as entertainment. Continuing his monologue, he contemptuously expressed disappointment that the hero who once saved the world and the greatest magical engineer would turn out to be such bad and unbearable people. When the king finished speaking, Braban and Gatsuan were very shocked by what they heard, and instead of coherent objections, all that came out was a muffled formal address, spoken in a raised voice. His Majesty, also leaving, reported that the gentleman who had sought refuge in their country had been arrested. He wanted to discuss this news during a joint barbecue, emphasizing the importance of this meeting. In closing, Waswamp added that he would pretend that the meeting had never happened. He also noted that he wanted to revisit relations with their country, making it clear that he was deeply disappointed and did not want to deal with them anymore. After the master left, Braban suddenly shouted the name of the magic mechanic, so loudly that his face distorted with rage and malice. Absolutely furious at the situation, he accused Gatsuan of extreme incompetence, also that he should have been in control of everything personally from the very beginning, not trusting anyone with his duties. Having caught his breath a little, the fair-haired guy coldly noted that the engineer could have already been fired under other circumstances. However, since there was a festival going on, he simply did not finish his sentence, thinking about punishment. Now, the man was demoted, not even the deputy minister of the Department of Magical Devices, but the assistant minister. That was Braban's verdict for Gatsuan. He was stunned by what he heard. Clearly he did not expect a demotion. When the festival came to an end, Gatsuan walked sadly down the street. Walking alone, he remembered the words of his son, who dreamed of becoming a minister like his father. He realized with bitterness that he would not be able to tell his family about his humiliating demotion by 2 ranks. Also, because of possible ridicule, he would not be able to tell his loved ones either. The man believed that information should not be disseminated during the festival, so he firmly assured himself that he would return to the post of minister until the next personnel changes, hiding the current situation. These thoughts lifted his spirits, increasing his determination to take his position back, and he wanted to give it his all. As he walked happily towards his office, he heard muffled conversations behind the half-open door of his office. He decided to carefully look through the crack to see what was going on. Through it, he could see 2 guys putting on an absurd show. They were pompously congratulating a doll imitating Mr. Universe on his appointment to the post of minister. Then, smiling, they began to say that they had always believed in him and that he was much better than some Gatsuan. The peeping man was deeply outraged by the words of these people. With bared teeth, he burst into the office, furiously accusing them of throwing trash in someone else's place, making it clear that this was no place for a doll. The noise made them turn around, and their gazes immediately caught a familiar figure. With barely concealed mockery, they addressed him, deliberately using his new title of assistant minister, as if testing whether he was ready to accept such a fall. Filled with anxiety, Gatsuan frantically demanded to know how they had learned the secret details. The answer was a cold-blooded confession. One of them had talked to a nun who had witnessed the events at that fateful banquet. One of the people present said that he knew about his demotion due to his recent behavior, adding that Mr. Universe had now been appointed minister. That was why their strange ritual with the doll was just a rehearsal for the grand reception. The man couldn't take it anymore and shouted that it didn't matter and he was still their boss. Suddenly a man comes in and kicks Gatsuan, causing him to scream, while the stranger says that he is a loser. The man who entered gave his name and introduced himself as the new leader. At the same time, he pointed out that the gentleman sitting on the floor did not respect his superiors at all, and ordered him to be called by his new position. Repeated physical aggression from Apal resulted in the former minister ending up on the floor, unable to hold back a cry of pain. All this happened to the accompaniment of a mocking remark about the man's bad luck. Gritting his teeth from the unpleasant sensations, Gatsuan promised that, upon returning to his post, he would certainly take double revenge. In response, he only sarcastically admired his zeal, smirking and clearly not taking his threat seriously. Apple, recognizing the meager chances of the man now subordinate to him, asked him a rhetorical question. Would Mr. Universe agree to appoint a man who had mocked him as a minister? And this problem had an answer within itself. The new boss calmly reported that after a joint discussion, it was decided to physically assault him, adding that Universe would only be happy to see his offender in a bad state. He explained that these actions would completely compensate for all the previous humiliations they had inflicted on the master. With obvious sarcasm, he stated that now it was their turn to act, in a Gatsugan way, deliberately using that term. Gatsuan, finally realizing the similarity between his situation and that which Universe had once been in, let out a loud cry of despair. In a burst of emotion, he declared that from now on he was ready to do all of Apal's dirtiest work. The irritated boss abruptly demanded that his subordinate leave the premises, accompanying this with offensive epithets. His loud exclamations, intensified by anger, emphasized the complete decline of the former minister's status. A procession of carriages moved along the road, drawn by mechanical horses whose artificial joints creaked rhythmically in time with their steps. King Wazwamp, riding in one of the carriages, thought with disgust that he had never imagined how horrible people could be elevated to the rank of heroes. His words sounded like bitter disappointment at such bad people. The attendant, addressing the king with due respect, informed him of the proximity to the border and told him to look at something that was near them. Despite the formal respectfulness, there was alarm in his intonation. The ruler looked out the window and was very surprised. The soldiers lined up in letters, creating a sentence saying that Universe was to blame for everything so he could return. Wazvamp's mood turned from bewilderment to extreme rage. His thoughts were spinning around the unforgivable lack of remorse for what he had done on the part of his offenders. He realized that he could not stand it any longer. As he drove along the road, a sign appeared saying that Lake Requado was ahead. The king, in a rage, ordered the owner to immediately remove the offensive signs, every single one of them. The man nervously replied that everything had already been cleaned up. Looking around, Wazwamp noticed a sign that depicted a certain young man in the company of Princess Typhona. He was surprised to recognize the guy depicted as Universe, which caused him obvious shock. At that moment, the man next to him asked if he knew him. The man noted with admiration that the guy was a famous traveler who left behind legendary stories, one of which they carefully preserved. The king, clearly stunned by this statement, asked what this amazing story was. The narrator was only too happy to tell that this young man not only masterfully prepared exquisite dishes, but also set a world record by easily catching a giant mosen. Thanks to these achievements, he displaced Braban from the first place. After hearing this story, the king sadly said that despite all this man was guilty of kidnapping Princess Typhon. Mr. Owner asked if the guy he was talking to had spirit, because, if so, it was complete nonsense, and the girl standing next to him added that they got along very well, like a couple in love. A passerby noted that the princess sharply condemned everyone who mocked Universe, as if the insults were addressed to her personally. A girl from the crowd, not hiding her admiration, added that such a relationship was very beautiful. The king looked again at the image of the boy and the princess. He thought about the fact that the young master had caught the biggest mosan. This brought a smile to his face. Meanwhile, the two are riding in a carriage. The girl decides to ask her companion if the water from the ponds is drinkable or not. He replies that he heard that in most cases it is drinkable. He also noted that in the ponds where spirits live, the water is clean and, if drunk, it can restore strength to travelers. The princess suddenly perked up and suggested that Universe got his strength this way during his campaigns, asking what it tasted like. But he said that he got his strength without drinking water, and this amazed the girl. At that moment, an idea came to Typhon. Since none of them had ever drunk such water, they should try it, because she herself had never drunk it, but she really wanted to. Well then, let's head towards the water. He said that, down by the road where he stopped during the hike, there is something. Namely, the Fountain of Souls. This made the girl happy, so she cheerfully declared the importance of going there quickly to drink that wonderful water. Typhon and Universe travel to their destination while being carried by the mechanical horse Trance. The girl says that she really wants to drink water from the fountain, and admits that she is so thirsty that her throat is already very dry. The spirit's refuge is in the forest, and it is not so easy to find. When the guy was here the last time, during the battle with the Lord, they searched for him for a very long time. At this moment, Universe's gaze falls on a strange building in the distance, similar to a statue. It was not clear what kind of statue it was. The protagonist noted that this unusual statue served as a good landmark, making it much easier to find this place. However, his attention almost immediately switched to something else. His attention was drawn to an ancient temple with an engraved inscription stating that it was the Cathedral of the Source. While the protagonist was trying to comprehend the scale of the changes that had taken place here, Typhon greeted someone. The door of the building opened with a grinding and screeching sound. A tired-looking nun emerged from the doorway and greeted them politely at first, calling the place the Haven of the Spirits of the Spring. But her calmness instantly vanished when she recognized one of the travelers as an unwanted guest. The girl, recognizing Universe, literally trembled with indignation, accusing him of unheard-of impudence, namely, appearing in this sacred place. Her voice full of anger demanded an explanation of the purpose of his visit. While he was muttering something inaudibly under his breath, his companion politely and smilingly explained that they just wanted to drink water from the fountain. The hostess, after thinking, reluctantly, formally invited them inside, told them to make themselves at home. The nun, softening her tone but remaining wary, asked Universe to show respect for the local spirits. Typhon immediately stood up for him, fervently assuring him that he would never allow himself to behave in such a manner. The princess, wanting to prove her case, addressed Universe directly, but he only excitedly offered to listen to him, but he was interrupted by a woman who showed them the way to the fountain. Everything there was decorated and colorful, as if a holiday was coming soon. The girl went first to the water, which was quietly bubbling. But she received a warning that the water was safe to drink, but she should be aware of the possible consequences for the body. Disappointed by this news, Typhon said that she had not imagined everything this way, to which the woman sarcastically told her to blame Universe for this. She told that this young man had once visited this place with the hero squad, and something happened, he crucified the spirit and used it as a target, and if it is hard to believe, then you can ask that very hero about it. Continuing her story, the black-haired lady explained that since then the spirits have kept away, which is why everything is almost abandoned. Various methods were tried to bring them back here, and so that they would forgive, a cathedral was built. These spirits are very timid, but the nun thought that if she waited patiently, maybe at least one would return. She specially decorated everything around for this purpose for their possible arrival. However, now the girl, depressed and almost crying, said that everything was over, because due to the appearance of Mr. Universe near the fountain, no one would return for sure, but the guy's companion expressed her opinion that this was just a misunderstanding. Without hiding her tears, the lady turned around and shouted, asking what Typhon meant by misunderstanding. And then she saw something that put her into a very strong shock. Typhon turned around and saw that the guy was surrounded by so many spirits that he was almost invisible, as if he was not there. The woman was so surprised by what was happening that she began to speak very loudly about the very large number of spirits in the spring. She also noted that it was almost invisible, even the outline of a figure behind this veil of spirits. A question burst out of her about how this was even possible. Feeling ill, she fell down and fell asleep. To which the guy and the girl reacted and immediately ran up to her, finding out if everything was okay, but realized that things were bad. They took her into the room, covered her with a blanket, and put her to bed. She developed a fever and became delirious in her sleep, talking about her friends not leaving her, that she was very lonely here because she was all alone. When she woke up, Typhon gave her water, saying that it was ordinary water, to which she thanked her and took a few sips. The girl told that she had a dream where the young gentleman was surrounded by the spirits of the spring, to which she was told that it was not a dream. Continuing, she admitted that even if it was a dream, if this guy managed to summon the spirits, then she was very happy. The nun decided to ask the young man for forgiveness for what had happened earlier, for her rudeness in words. To which he awkwardly replied that it was nothing to worry about. Afterwards, the lady invited the guests to stay the night with her, since it was already quite late to set off on a journey. It's deep night, everyone is fast asleep, and only Universe has woken up and sat up in bed. He stood up and walked somewhere purposefully and carefully, trying not to wake anyone. As it turned out, he was heading to the garden where the water source was located. Everything there was sparkling with decorations. The guy started to take off all the decorations. He started to speak quietly, as if thinking that he would be punished for this, that it was very beautiful. He fell silent for a bit, taking off the next element of decor. But for these creatures, they were too bright, which, as it seemed to him, might disturb them. It turned out that someone had been watching him all this time, cautiously peering out from their hiding place. Universe noticed the peeping Tom, and he quietly voiced his thoughts out loud that she had probably just been born, so he gently said that she didn't have to be afraid because nothing glittered anymore. He reached out his hand to this little creature, to which the spirit girl recoiled, frightened of him, and he said that he could get her out of there. To which she closed her eyes and decided to bite his finger. Her tiny body was shaking with fear. Opening her eyes, she saw the bite wound and that he had not removed his hand and was looking at her with a small smile. She was surprised by this. Afterwards, Universe asked her if she had calmed down and told her not to worry because he was not her enemy. As it turned out, this little crumb can heal, which she did by licking the boy's wound. She looked at him with a guilty look, to which he said that he was not at all angry with the baby. The delighted little girl, her eyes shining with joy, expressed her desire to be friends with him. Universe invited him to sit on his palm with a rather polite address, and then he was surrounded by a crowd of spirits, glowing in the dark. The guy was surprised, but nevertheless decided to honestly say that even if he was glad to see them all, he didn't need to behave the same way as during the day. It was better to approach them one by one if necessary. Which the main character immediately regretted. After all, they really did line up in a very large and long line. Then he couldn't help but smile and laugh, and the spirits surrounded him again. There was someone else who was watching this funny picture from the window. It was a nun. She couldn't believe her eyes, because the spirits of the spring had really returned to their home. Still surprised, she muttered that they all missed Universe so much, although in theory they should have hated it. Typhon joined her, saying that he had always been kind to the spirits, and that was why they all adored him so much. The girl turned to the boy's companion. She decided to clarify whether this was true, asking if she was a wind spirit, to which the girl apologized for not introducing herself yet and gave her name. The black-haired lady was a little embarrassed and asked again the name, referring to the fact that this was the name of one princess of this element, to which Typhon answered a little awkwardly that she was that very princess. This caused a great surprise and shock in the nun. She was so shocked that she could not restrain herself and screamed very loudly that it could even be heard on the street. From this scream, Universe came running to them very quickly, asking if everything was okay. He was amazed by what he saw. His companion was standing, embarrassed and fiddling with her hair. And the mistress of the house was on her knees and asking forgiveness for the ignorance she had shown in not knowing that she was a princess. In the spirits' havens, everything is done for them, so they are especially honored here. There is a strict hierarchy. Although in the eyes of the public, humans are considered higher ranking, Typhon tried to explain that there is nothing wrong with that. And the little girl expressed surprise and admiration when she saw the spirits of the spring. She asked them if they adored Universe. Not waiting for an answer from them, she said that she loved him too and jumped into his arms. The kneeling girl looked at the two of them with such genuine surprise. Confused, she decided to personally find out why the spirits loved him so much, because the spirits of the spring are especially unsociable and uncommunicative. Universe looked away, and Typhon answered for him, saying that he exuded a tenderness that enveloped her completely, like the scent of flowers, because of which she reached out like a butterfly very close to him. The maiden on the floor bowed her head again, and she sincerely asked him to explain to her how the spirits could be returned to their haven. Universe asked her why she needed it. She looked up and looked at him sadly. The lady began to explain that more and more forest was being cut down nearby to build the cathedral, which meant that eventually it would be completely wiped out and turned into a walking park. Then, more loudly, she began to lead to the fact that this means that if this happens, the spirits will have nowhere to live. Therefore, she asks for help because it will be very difficult for her to cope alone. To which the main character will stutter and answer about the understood problem, after which everyone began to smile, especially the hostess of the cathedral. The next day, Universe began to explain what was done, that the creatures of the fountain do not like light unless it is reflected in the water, therefore all the decor must be removed. The nun sadly said that she did not know this and on the contrary thought that they would be pleased with the sparkles. Typhon, having finished cleaning, asked if anything else was needed and offered to clean the water in the fountain, but received the answer that the spirits would do everything themselves. This was explained by the fact that springs with spirits become cleaner naturally. However, in this state of affairs, it could take 10 years. But from that moment, gradually, before she could finish the sentence, she stopped. And all because Universe started telling the spirits that if someone wanted to have fun with him purifying water, they could sit on his finger. And instantly a mushroom cap formed on his finger, only with spirits. And in a joyful voice he said that now we can have fun and pointed with his finger in the direction where we need to fly. The spirits began to have fun and work, cleaning the water in the fountain. Everyone who watched this experienced childish delight. It was very beautiful and fabulous. The girl screamed in surprise and looked into the water. She was completely cleansed, and she said in disappointment that she had been stupid, immature, and unwise. She began to sadly tell him that she had grown up in this shelter and thought she knew more about spirits than anyone else. Typhon came to her to calm her down and stroked her head. She decided to cheer up her interlocutor, saying that despite everything, she was trying very hard to understand the spirits. The woman agreed with these words, and the girl continued her monologue. She noticed that the hostess treated the spirits as people, while most people perceive them as animals, so Typhon expressed her joy in a smile and said that all spirits are very happy when they are treated as equals. The nun realized this and asked if she would stick to this. Could she ever become like her teacher? The girl asked again who she meant by teacher, who turned out to be Universe. And the guy just watched their conversation from the side, beginning to predict in advance that something would happen. The princess continued to say that, unlike her, this guy was much more popular among the wind spirits. The dark-haired lady expressed her opinion that she thought so, that their teacher was an extraordinary person, to which she received the same answer from the girl, who considered him amazing. Both of their eyes filled with happiness and began to shine very brightly. Turning to Universe, they joyfully said that he was their teacher. The guy was carefully making something with a knife. Typhon noticed him and decided to come and see what he was doing. Spirits were flying around him, watching the process. Seeing the young man carving something out of wood, she expressed delight, asking if he was capable of doing that too. She asked if he was making a platform for the spirits of this haven, to which Universe replied that he was, and when he was here before. His story was interrupted by the nun, who said that the hero had said that he had done everything for the spirits himself. The girl answered her, saying that she did not think that was exactly the case. She decided to check with the guy if it was true, and he got a little nervous. And the woman, dressed in an apostolnik, shared her thoughts that in fact, that man was bad and treated the spirits terribly. She could not believe it at the time and denied everything. Then she crouched down and leaned towards the ground, starting to apologize for being in this ignorance. Universe, confused by this, nervously asked her to raise her head. But she, without raising her head, replied that she was not worthy of this, because she had made a terrible mistake by acting in this way with him. As she continued speaking, the lady panicked, realizing something. She realized that it wasn't just her who had done wrong, but also another nun from the neighboring cathedral. She didn't know what to do now, and the two interlocutors, not understanding what was going on, decided to find out. They entered some room on the top floor of the cathedral. Afterwards, a cloth was pulled off something large and someone's statue appeared. Typhon covered her mouth in shock, realizing that the statue was a copy of the hero who saved the country from destruction, to which she received a question about whether she really thought so from the puzzled guy. The girl decided to find out what this statue was for. The woman admitted that they had to compete with the neighboring cathedral. They decided that they would make statues of the hero and see who would attract more spring spirits. Then they had to present them to King Waswamp, and he would choose the winner. After the story, the girl asked her a question, not understanding how they came to this. To which she received a sad answer that without the spirits of the spring, they cannot maintain this place, therefore without such measures the temple can be destroyed. That is how they decided to borrow the hero from each other. But now she realizes that the hero statue does not have the ability to summon spirits, which means that she does not understand what to do now. But Typhon very happily declares that everything is simple. She also optimistically stated that she could make a statue of Universe. This made the young man blush because he did not expect that the solution to the problem was his own statue. However, the woman noted that His Royal Majesty would arrive in a few days, and she also promised to show him the statue of the hero. Typhon was persistent, saying that if the goal was to summon spirits, then there was no need to think about it. Only after realizing this, the nun agreed, and the princess added that especially if they help, then together they will definitely cope, and everything will be finished. She asked the spirits if they agree, and she received a joyful squeak, meaning consent. The two maidens were delighted, and it was decided to build a statue of Mr. Universe. However, Universe himself refused to build it because no one makes a statue of themselves. You could see how nervous he was. Everyone was surprised by this statement. Their mouths dropped open in surprise. They started asking him questions and saying that he was well versed in this. To which the guy, embarrassed, replied that it was so. However, the fact that he would make a statue for himself would cause him great awkwardness. To which the girl decided to find out about what had happened in the village of Idon. However, the guy said that it was her own doing. Sadly, almost crying, Typhon asked him if these feelings were bad, saying that he was very cool and that many people looked up to him. So it should become even cooler for everyone. He resigned himself and began to make a statue of himself. The girl expressed her gratitude for the help and received the go-ahead that he had only helped a little with the body, and the girl was beaming with happiness. She said that she was very happy that they could work on something together. He played over in his head what Typhon had said about them being together, and he realized with relief that if she was happy, then everything was fine. When Universe finished making the body, everyone was delighted, saying that it was simply perfect. And with complete determination, they declared that they would take care of the head themselves. However, they redid it many times, thinking about how it would look better, but it turned out very badly. Tired, they were already starting to get angry that they couldn't do it right. A guy came to visit them, but Typhon immediately decided to drive him away, telling him not to come closer, to which the guy, leaving, said that if they grind down the face even more, it will be very small. She screamed inside herself that her artistic inner beast would not awaken. Then she began to say that the sculpture was not the embodiment of his idea, but the extraction of the true form of the stone, and she sighed heavily. Universe listened to this silently. A little later, he called her to offer to accept the help of the little spirits of the earth. She was very happy, and her mood immediately began to improve. The girl was shocked that they could understand such things well, and suggested that they mold Universe-kun together. She pompously put on her glasses, pushed her coat aside, and struck a pose to appear even cooler. While maintaining this magnificent appearance, she began to control the process, saying that the nose needed to be made more crooked, and in the mouth there needed to be more chips on the teeth, adding realism to the sculpture. Almost finished, she began to say that she already looked very similar and amazing. At that moment, a nun came in and asked if everyone wanted to take a short break to eat, and everyone happily agreed to rest and gain strength. The spirits of the spring and the earth also drank tea and ate sugar. They were happy and had a tasty meal. Even Typhon was happy. The mistress of the cathedral decided to come up and ask if the young man had a minute to discuss something very important with her. He hesitated and answered, muttering something. She wanted to learn to get along with spirits as well as her teacher did. She also shared that she always believed that people could only do one thing, scare away spirits, and when she wanted to get help from them, she caught them with a net, as if they were some kind of insects. But the young master does not do this, and still receives help from them. That is why she asked herself this question: how can she become the same as him? He listened silently and thought. But then he said that they needed to be used. He explained this by saying that when they are asked to use their power, the spirits are very happy that they can be useful. However, this does not mean that they open up to all people in this way. They will never help those who see them only as a way to achieve their goal. Continuing his monologue, he explained that this is because they are not servants who grant wishes. It is important to look at them as allies with whom you build the future together. And all he wants is for all the spirits that are near him to always smile, because he constantly takes care of this. When he finished speaking, he noticed that everyone was listening attentively and was very touched by his words. Even Typhon, almost crying, addressed him formally and asked why he was so kind, because this makes him an invaluable ally and partner. Panicked, Universe began to tell them to stop talking like that. Or to be more precise, please, stop. Even now he said it very politely, which made the girls laugh, and he started to pout. At the same time, in the city next door, a huge statue of the hero Bribon is visible. The cathedral called Founder is visible, a haven for spirits. At this time, a cry full of disappointment is heard. The great nun nervously wonders why the spirits of the spring do not return, since they built such a huge statue of the hero. She is very worried and mutters that if she does not win, she will never become a real nun. There was a noise outside the door and someone formally called the woman. Pulling herself together, she calmly ordered him to come in. The girls came and said that they had brought donations for this week and asked to accept them. She thanked them for their work and hurried them away, saying at the end that the spirits would bless them. Then she abruptly began to pour the coins out of the bag, and she took one coin with 2 fingers. At that moment, she realized something. It seemed to her that the statue was not bright enough. That is, if it were made more shiny and sparkling, she was ready to bet that spirits, to put it in an uncultured way, would flock to it like moths to a light. And the next step, she will ask to demolish the shelter for spirits nearby. Thus, she would immediately get rid of that holy mother who is in the way under her feet. So she will own that land and get a lot of money and power. She has already started dreaming that she will get everything she wants and it will become a reality very soon. The nun looked at the chest decorated with precious stones. And she said sadly that she had no more money from her patrons, and also that the money to pay the monks was running out. What made her decide to put everything on the line, that is, herself and the saints of this haven. There is a letter on the table which states that, if the debt is not repaid within a specified period, the great nun and 5 saints of this cathedral are to be given into slavery. The man in the hat congratulated the woman on her good deal and said it had been a pleasure dealing with her. She had received a very large chest, in which there were a lot of coins. She was simply beside herself with happiness. She thought that now she would definitely become famous throughout the entire pleasure district, and everyone would simply go crazy over the sparkling statue of the hero. The nun happily threw coins around the room, thinking that tomorrow King Wazvamp would be present at the opening of the statues of the hero, became even more confident in her victory. She understood that a huge success awaited her. The day has come when it will be decided who will win. someone began to say that now it is necessary to decide which cathedral will become the true temple. Now the comparison of statues will begin. Therefore, I give my word to King Losvamp. The ruler began the evaluation. The first statue, the largest, is at the Cathedral of the Spring, but it seems that it is good only in the face. Because, first of all, it is important how much she calls upon the spirits of the spring. The great nun began to say that they had taken care of this. Because once the cloth covering the statue is removed, everyone will see the face of the real hero, and the spirits will undoubtedly rush here and knock over the statue standing nearby. At this point, a younger nun entered the conversation, apologizing for interrupting the conversation, and said that they had worked hard to make their statue together. At her words, she heard the laughter of her rival, who did not believe that she made the statue with someone because she was always alone. This made the girl sad. The king decided to calm the quarreling women by saying that at a signal, they would have to remove the cloth from the statues. The girls got ready. The signal was given, and they threw the canvases off the sculptures. The outlines of the statues were already visible. The king, looking at them, was shocked. One of the statues of the ball is completely covered in perfume. The surprise, which turned into a scream, could not be contained even by the nun who built the huge statue. Vaswamp, without understanding why at all, realized that this sculpture was dedicated to Universe. This surprised the woman, who decided to politely ask if he knew the teacher. A little nervously and stuttering, he replied that he did not know him personally, but throughout all this time, no matter who the ruler had encountered, there had been good things about the young man. The girl, not hiding her delight, proudly said that His Majesty was right. Her teacher was a wonderful person. And also, none of the spirits is as popular as the teacher. Even his statue has attracted many creatures, although it is only his image. The king listened to the lady and said that he understood, and saw that all these spirits were smiling just like Princess Typhon. At this time, the evil nun decided to slander the good nun, saying that it was all a lie. After all, spirits cannot reach out to the statue of a fake hero. Continuing to accuse her of lying, she gave her version, saying that she had tamed the spirits and summoned them, otherwise it was not clear how it happened that there were so many of them. She said that this act was disgusting, therefore the spirits would hate her and would not come to her anymore. And at that moment the wind rose, and everyone froze, feeling anxious. The great nun stopped speaking and became alert. But then she thought of something, smiling sarcastically. As she began her performance, she ordered everyone to look towards the forest, saying that it had begun to cry. She attributed this to the fury of spring. At that moment, spirits flew out from there. There were a lot of them, so everyone who was present at the grand opening of the statues paid attention to it. The nun cried out in a fit of joy that these spirits were flying towards her statue of the hero, and all this flying stuff would belong to her. The show was ending, and she loudly told the spirits to get ready. She ordered the destruction of the statue of the fake hero named Universe. She pointed in the direction of the enemy building, and a swarm of spirits headed towards it. However, her order was carried out exactly the opposite. They knocked over the statue of Braban with all their might, and it fell down with a crash. Beside herself with anger, the woman screamed at the top of her lungs, holding her head and yelling that this was not the statue that needed to be toppled. She kept screaming at them to stop, repeating and repeating over and over again to stop. She screamed and begged pitifully for someone to help, but the statue continued to crumble and crumble. She realized that her future was crumbling before her eyes. Pieces of rock fell onto the ground and onto one of the buildings, shattering into pieces. The structure was collapsing, and from the noise, people in neighboring houses ran out of their homes in panic. The woman watched the destruction, dumbfounded. Finally, it all ended and all the structures fell, leaving behind a pile of dust. At this time, several nuns approached the Holy Mother and knelt down. They began to pray and ask for her forgiveness for having made a huge mistake, and they asked to return to her haven for spirits. To which she, smiling, said that their doors were open to all who came, so they could return. Therefore, she suggested that from now on they live in harmony with the spirits of the spring, according to the precepts of the Teacher Universe. They unanimously expressed their consent, but another Holy Mother stopped them. She threateningly, swaying from side to side, screamed that she would not allow them to leave with her nuns. Even more viciously, she began to threaten to sell her into slavery and leave her completely alone. Someone appeared nearby and started saying that this is where we needed to go. 3 people came with ropes and shackles. The dark man was at the head. He began to ask where the saint was, who owed him a lot of money. to which the woman who had just been screaming began to pass off other girls as those they needed, telling them to clean up the Holy Mother too. The man began to say that he had a lot of beautiful women at home, so he hoped that they would get along and he would earn a lot of money. He told the ladies not to be afraid and that they would like it there. At that moment someone said that they should not hurry. The leader turned around, obviously thinking that the one who said it should shut up. It was King Waswamp. He said in a commanding tone that he forbade taking these people. Those men were definitely stunned to see the king himself, and especially to see him standing up for the girls. They nervously asked him what he was doing there. When he didn't answer, they were met with a more stern counter-question about what they were doing there, and more importantly, why they wanted to take those people. The dark man began to fawn, calling the king "Your Royal Majesty." He showed a paper stating that all the holy cathedrals had been left as collateral. The ruler read the agreement and confirmed that this was indeed what was written. However, the saints here are from the spirit house, not from the cathedral, so they can be considered not to be a pledge for this will. The man began to get nervous and began to reason, since this is not a saint, then where exactly is the one that is needed? His gaze fell on the second Holy Mother. He raised his voice, saying it was her, clearly not expecting to see an older person. Disappointed, he resigned himself to this fate, ordered the other two guys to simply take her with them. The woman was clearly surprised by this turn of events and tried to object. She was put in a cage on wheels, and this man addressed her in a disrespectful manner, calling her an old woman. He said that she would have to work off the money she had borrowed and they didn't care what the cost was, as long as she was punished. Everyone watched as the carriage drove away, taking the woman with it. Finally, the king, turning to the Holy Mother, that although he had not yet said anything, it was obvious that she was winning this contest, to which the maiden, overjoyed, thanked the ruler. Then, everyone went with Wasvamp to the Spirit Haven. He expressed great admiration, saying that this place was very beautiful and pleasantly simple. He also shared his thoughts that he could even stay here for a few days with pleasure. At this time, Typhon and Universe watched the half-open door. The guy started telling his companion that he was asked to pass on something. He was silent for a while, then he continued to talk in the girl's ear, trying not to be heard, that they were being hunted for a reason, so they had to somehow get away. The lady, finding his words funny, laughed loudly. Universe tried to calm her down and tell her to be quieter, and she decided to call the Holy Mother, who was standing behind the door. The girl informed the nun that they were leaving, confessing that they had been on their honeymoon and were going to continue it. The young man was shocked by these words. The woman giggled and said that she understood them, expressing her guess that she already suspected that they were not just friends. To which the princess, also laughing, confirmed the lady's words. The black-haired maiden expressed a desire to be also connected with the spirits of the spring, wanted it to be just as harmonious and gentle, and most importantly, built on mutual trust from the bottom of her heart. Frozen a little, Typhon smiled and replied that she was absolutely sure that the second one would definitely succeed. The girl asked what Universe thought about it, but he didn't say anything, just smiled. He saw how the spirits had already found this connection with the Holy Mother, and the princess saw it too and understood everything. The creatures carefully hugged the girl, who stood there, not understanding why her teacher was not giving an answer to the question. The nun saw off her guests as they left in a carriage to continue their travels. She waved sadly after them. Two young girls approached her and began to smile. The spirits flew, joyfully flapping their wings. Universe looked back at them and gave a soft, reserved smile. He was happy for this girl, because she had found not just acquaintances, but friends. She was happy. After some time of driving, they made a stop. The guy said that they had almost reached the capital of the kingdom, beyond which was Konkantower. He noted that according to the plan they should pass through the capital, however, there is a high probability that wanted posters are already hanging at every step. There are a lot of people there, so they need to be careful, to which the girl suggested disguising themselves. As if by magic, the princess was already standing in disguise, wearing a hat, glasses, and a mask. At the same time, she said that her ears were blocked. The guy replied that this costume was rather strange. She quickly realized that it would be better to change her image, and this time she appeared as a dancer with bright and colorful pieces of clothing. She asked her companion if he looked like a dancing girl. In her defense, she said that music could be heard from their city in the distance. And Universe remembered that right now a festival in honor of the heroes is in full swing there. He made a decision and told Typhon that they would go this way, and the girl, overjoyed, said that it was time to hit the road. To which the young man asked not to hurry, and the girl, not understanding what was wrong, decided to find out why it was necessary not to hurry. He explained that if she danced, she would attract too much attention and they could get caught. He asked why she was disguised then. And the girl, pouting, muttered that he should change his clothes too. All because it would be weird to see a girl dancing next to a guy in a regular work shirt. Continuing to persuade Universe, she brought up an even more compelling argument that if there were posters with their faces hanging there, then everyone knew their clothes too. The princess was obviously trying more not to avoid being caught, but to see the guy she adored in different clothes, so she smiled sarcastically and looked at him. She happily ordered him to go and change, and she would start picking out clothes for him. Universe silently agreed. Typhon was happy and pleased with herself, so she decided to jokingly ask where such cool guys go, speaking about themselves. She dressed up Mr. Universe as a rather stylish trumpeter. The guy felt uncomfortable in these clothes and said that it looked flashy, to which the girl noted that this style is currently at the peak of popularity. She also told him about the plan that he would play the trumpet and she would dance, although it was strange. However, it won't look suspicious. She hurried him, but only heard him say her name very loudly. He ordered her not to dare dance. They came to the kingdom of Wazbampu, to the capital itself. It was the height of the dance competition dedicated to the festival in honor of the heroes. She loved it so much when they entered the city that she screamed with joy, saying how cool she felt here. Typhon, having fun, offered to dance to her companion. Universe realized in his mind that she wasn't listening to him at all. Meanwhile, people began to pay attention to the girl dancing on top of the carriage. They all began to say that this girl was cool and even danced quite well. They started shouting at her that she was the best while the guy was driving the carriage. And then he saw the wanted posters. That made him panic. The unknown man looked closely at the crying man and checked with the passing cart, looking straight at Universe, which made him start to get nervous. He became afraid that if they were exposed, it would be very, very bad. But it was a success. The man also decided to support the girl, calling her a beauty, and advised her to continue in the same spirit. The young man exhaled, thinking that he was almost caught, and then the princess looked in on him, persuading him to dance, to which he replied that he does not dance. And, supplementing his answer, he tells her to look around, showing that on almost every corner there are wanted posters with their portraits. The girl, genuinely surprised, asks if it's really him. After all, on the sign he doesn't look like himself, as if he's a completely different person. Universe is confused, asks if it's true, and she says that he looks more like Braben there. Typhon resolutely says that she will not leave it like this and purposefully intends to get off the cart to tear down all the posters. But the young gentleman stops her. He explains that if she does this, it will be a criminal offense, because tearing down wanted posters is not so easy. He reluctantly says that she can dance, but the main thing is not to touch the posters. The girl agrees with the guy, but decides to point out to him that it is not necessary to drive along the main streets so often, since at such moments it is better to stay in the shadows so as not to arouse unnecessary suspicions. Jumping onto the roof again, she is about to dance. And he, looking at the princess running upstairs, smiles and mutters that since she says so, then he will do so. The festival was already in full swing on the square. Someone began the opening of the main event of the holiday in honor of the heroes. The speaker announced to everyone that the best participants of the dance competition were waiting for them, and let those who wanted to show themselves go up on stage. He continued to tell the details of the competition, saying that the winning team would receive a prize. And Universe thought in his mind that the residents of the capital really liked to dance. The first contender took to the stage. The speaker called the girl on stage very cute, assuring that everyone else thought so too. He also said that she had already won the visual category, trying to cheer her up like that. At that moment, Universe realized that Typhon was on stage, realizing that this was too much. She began her speech by saying that she is not only very sweet and beautiful, but also a great dancer, also saying that she is completely confident of her victory in the dance category. The speaker was shocked by her words, and therefore, having said that since she calls herself a winner, it means she is very brave, and the audience began to rejoice and be happy. He said that now he needed to see how she could dance, so he should call his musicians. Confused, she didn't understand what he was talking about and asked again what kind of musicians he meant. He quickly answers, as if from a piece of paper, that it will not be possible to dance without music, because each dancer must have his own personal instrumental assistants. Instrumentalists produce mind-blowing sounds using the latest electronic instruments. This activity is also popular among young people. Saddened, Typhon came down from the stage. Her companion called her by name. She also called him by name in a sad voice. She decided to consult him about what to do. Since she was told that an instrumentalist assistant was needed to participate in the dance competition, she wanted to think of something to do about it. The girl shared with Universe-kun that she always dreamed of dancing with people in the outside world. She thought she would be able to once she married the hero, but he wouldn't let her. Already crying, she said that she wanted to finally dance in front of everyone today, and asked if he could think of something. The young man had just realized that the spirits of the wind loved to dance. However, Typhon herself could not allow herself to do so since she was a princess. And yet, he brought her to the dance capital of the world and forbade her to dance. He called her by name. He told her firmly that it didn't matter whether he could play electronic instruments or not, but he would still do everything that was asked of him. Therefore, he promised that he would definitely bring the girl on stage. She was delighted and touched by his words. She immediately ran to say that she would participate. When she returned, she said that she was told to come back later, to which the young man replied that he understood. He thought about it, and Typhon became sad. He apologized for making her worry, but the girl said that it was nothing to worry about, and Universe, once again deciding to cheer the girl up, said that he would never give up for the sake of the spirits. She froze for a moment, but then smiled and said that his words were so different from the promises of that hero, as if she were saying that he really believed his friend. After all, a hero will do everything possible to become famous throughout the world. He will never give up. That's why he wanted Typhon to give up everything she had and sacrifice everything for him. And also, between the hero, who tries to be the best in everything, and Mr. Universe-kun, the spirits will choose the master, precisely because you are different from him in everything. The girl also decided to mention that her current companion had once asked her to dance for him. She wanted to sit down, and the young man wanted to say that it was better not to sit there, but he didn't have time. She, having sat down on something, suddenly jumped up, screaming from sharp pain. The boy and girl decided to see what was there. It turned out to be a gramophone setup. Universe rated this device and said that it is well built and very durable inside, meaning it is usable. He read the inscription, which said that the product was made in Doodle, and then something reacted to these words. A voice was heard from the installation. As it turned out, they were tree spirits. They were asking the couple if they knew Doodle. The guy replied that he was familiar with it because he was a woodworker and worked with sound. To which the spirits responded in surprise, saying that many used to dance to it, but today's youth began to prefer metal boxes. Then, the young man had the idea to ask them to play their music for the guys again. They agreed immediately, saying that they would do it for him with pleasure. However, they asked if he was an amateur, since those young people would not give him a chance at all. But the guy assured them that this was not the case. He just really wanted this girl to go on stage again. And Typhon showed interest in the appearance of these spirits, and called them very cute. And she added that she really wants to dance to their music. She kindly asked them to dance together, promising that it would be a lot of fun. They thought for a while. And then they decided to agree, citing how the girl had offered to nicely join her. Universe wiped the gramophone, and at that moment a guy came in and called Typhon onto the stage, telling her to get ready. The speaker informed the guests that the dance competition was coming to an end, and the last team of wind dancers was coming onto the stage. There was applause and ovation. Meanwhile, a guy and a girl were carrying a gramophone onto the stage while counting. People started looking askance, not understanding what kind of piece of wood they were carrying. To which one of the guests said that it was called a gramophone. His father had one when he was little. Words of surprise came from everywhere, realizing that this device was very old. And even someone expressed their opinion that for such a girl, you need to play the synthesizer. Typhon snatched the microphone from the host and began to speak. She decided to end this discussion by saying that there is no need to talk like that, just let them listen. After all, it will be a great performance, and the legendary DJ Universe will play. The audience began to make even louder noise, saying that they didn't know anything like that, and the guy at the gramophone was already getting nervous. But the spirits decided to cheer him up, telling him not to worry because they would take care of everything, since they were here to have fun too. He smiled, and Typhon turned to him, also smiling, and said thank you to the guy with all her heart, because for her this was the moment she had been waiting for a long time. However, Universe said that it was too early to thank them because they were just starting, and they started their number.